Story begins in the dungeon. Tyros, the deeper, the farther. Deeper they go, the more everything consumes. In the darkness, a battle fueled by despair is already very close. In the dungeon, several people met the Lord of the Restless at Demon Lick. Dungeon, one of them believed that the undead are the strongest type. About the monster, he called his minions, and the people loudly said that it endlessly called monsters one after another, and there is no end in sight. What should they do? They called the princess, and she said, if they want this, defeat it, let their invasion continue. One of the team members thought that with her black curly hair which waves in rhythm. The wind pushes further, she continues to fight with despair as if this is her last battle. Her name is Yuika. Black Princess. Dungeon Digest is a specialized class that helps carry the traveler's equipment and allows their guide to reach the path on. Paths of exploration and conquest of the dungeon, 20 days before this. Or in the Tyros dungeon, at the depth of the 20th floor. A team of people was fighting against huge golems loudly declared that they could not waste this chance. There's still time, they need to act together. He ran away, and what are the tanks doing? The mage attacked one of these monsters. He used the spell Lightning Strike and defeated the monster. Later, near the underground oasis, they began to rest. And one of them loudly cursed what was happening. The mage drank a mana potion, and someone asked how many exactly. How many potions has he already drunk? A waste of mana. He turned around. He returned to him and said that nothing could be done about it. This vanguard is useless. The swordsman got angry and loudly asked what he was saying. He raised his stick, smiled, and asked. He was asked if he forgot what had just happened, and they immediately started an argument again. They switched to new arguments with each other when suddenly some guy approached. Are you fighting again? As long as no one pulls them apart, it's still okay. So is that it? The tired team member said. If he only wants to separate them, let him try. He was too exhausted to get involved. The dude with the huge backpack on the side decided that there was nothing left to do. Dungeon Sherpa, Ro approached and said that the two of them needed to listen. Shouting like that is dangerous, the monsters could hear. They returned to him and loudly declared that he could not possibly remember how he saw him during the fight. But where could that damned Sherpa have been anyway? He said with a smile. Did he go for some valuable herbs? The swordsman grumbled discontentedly. Isn't it cool to be a Sherpa? He doesn't have to fight monsters. It's an easy way to make money. The mage with a cheeky smile cut in. Supposedly it's a problem if they got wounded, so let him shut up. The protagonist replied, if he runs out of potions, he can give you some. He pulled out several elixirs and said that none of them were diluted with water, so they were all of high quality. Their words confused them and they decided, this is a healing elixir. He will heal your wounds. This restorative potion is the best choice to regain strength after fatigue. He even has a strength potion. The mage cast a glance with a barely noticeable smile, but it's not free. Really? He handed them the price list. They shuddered with surprise, stared at the numbers, and loudly blurted out, prices twice as high as market rates. Fencer grabbed him by the collar and thundered, are you mocking us, swindler? He, on the contrary, calmed them down, calmly asked them to pull themselves together and promised to inform them. For a dungeon, this is quite cheap. Even if they decide to return to the surface now, they won't be able to avoid clashes with monsters. Moreover, if that happens, their equipment will be damaged and they will have to pay an even higher price. If they buy it from him, they will save time and money. One party member thought that they even had enough endurance to get to the surface. The swordsman with a dissatisfied face loudly asked, is this already his victory or will they all perish? MC apologized and said that the price cannot be negotiated. But such an item is not simply bought on the market because it is for high-level adventurers. The party members called the leader and declared that they need to buy this exactly as high-level adventurers. They let them use high-level items. He should stop behaving like a barbarian. It's not worth it. He finally fell silent, let him go, and said that this time he would let it slide, but he would never hire him again. Ro smiled and said he was grateful for their cooperation. Later he thought about the city of Tyros, about this city. The city was built immediately after the dungeon was discovered. This is a city of adventure. He came to the Sherpa Guild, and a woman was already sitting in the hall. She leaned over the counter and greeted him. He called her an old witch and declared that he was already home. Home, she blossomed with a smile and asked how everything went with their unruly gang. He paused for a moment with a thought and replied that, as she said, they were all seasoned travelers. They were indeed rebellious, that's why they were called that, but regarding strength, strangely, they remained quite balanced. He thought they could hold out there for a long time, however, they said they would no longer hire him. She looked at him slightly displeased and said he was already the third. It turned out that if he failed, hiring others would be pointless. He continued and added that he would submit the report tomorrow. He needed to pick up his younger sister. Sister, she exclaimed and asked if he had left her with relatives again. Everything was difficult for him. After that, he came to. He turned onto another street, saw Mari, and called her by name. She smiled and rushed to him, hugging him tightly. Hugging his leg, she said, "Welcome back," and shuddered as soon as the door opened. That man from there called him and said that he finally returned. Protagonist Miro and said that he was grateful to her for always taking care of his sister. He gave her money and said he would inform her if he needed her help again. She slammed the door and declared that she didn't know whether she was ashamed or whatever feeling it was, but he didn't pay any attention to it at all. He patted her on the head and said it was time to go home. By the way, maybe they should pack lunch for the road. For lunch and off to a picnic in the forest, she took his hand and asked if they would be gathering gauzy fruits. He agreed and replied that it was just harvest season. They could gather some and make. And they made a lot of jam. She laughed and joy shone on her face, and she said they hadn't been on a picnic for so long. He looked at squeak 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 squeak. He looked at her with a smile and thought that a Sherpa never fights monsters. But can you really guess what will happen in a dungeon? A dungeon is a risky business where danger lurks around every corner. There is always a chance that he won't return. The little sister, she is only 4 years old, understands all this. They reached home and he promised there would be stew for dinner. She literally beamed with joy and said that he must allow her to help. The next day he came to the Sherpa Guild, greeted in the morning, and announced that he had brought a report on the dive. He was stunned when he saw a man by the door who calmly stated he was waiting specifically for him, but this was his favorite. An outstanding student was waiting for him. Let him tell about the wonderful job he had found. MC closed the door right in front of him and said that when he smiles and talks like that, it usually means he wants to drag him into some complicated work. He was trembling with nerves and he said that he had asked him for many things, but this time differently. They have an important person from the royal capital. He still opened the door and looked at him suspiciously. And the man said that this time the employer was a member of a famous group from the royal capital. In the hall, he declared that it was Twilight Sword. He looked at her in surprise and asked again, "What is this?" "This is exactly what the rumors in the guild are about, right?" After a positive answer, he thought, "That's right, as everyone knows. They cleared many dungeons, and the most famous among them are those listed in the Adventurers Group list published once a month. They are considered the hardest not by stats but by real strength. They always hold the top places. They are also called the Heroes of the East. Rumors say that their leader is a beautiful girl with black hair who is not yet 22 years old. As he understands, this will be their order." She introduced herself and said that she wants to clear the Tyro's dungeon. Will he help her achieve this? He thought. Today it became known that this dungeon stretches down 47 floors maximum. The last floor they could reach was 53. To clear the entire dungeon, they need to reach and clear the last floor. Exactly so. This happened because of the guild leader Gunji and the former guild leader Gimo. He demanded this from him: accompany the travelers. Dive into the deepest, still unexplored corners of the dungeon. This meeting marked the beginning of an amazing adventure, but they still did not know what lure really hid. He sneaked deeper all the way to the very bottom of the dungeon. There awaited true darkness. Leading the hero's squad into the farthest depths of the dungeon, such a mission was a great honor for the dungeon. Sherpa Ro raised his hand, smiled, thanked her for the offer, then said he was scared, therefore he must refuse. Diving into unexplored parts of the dungeon, that would take a lot of time, wouldn't it? He can't disappear for so long. Jima laughed and said that maybe she could train his sister as a Sherpa while he was absent. He loudly declared with an indignant expression that he was not joking. She called him Little One and asked if he was going to take care of his sister right. That's why he eventually became a Sherpa, because it was a very profitable business in this city. He should be happy because this time the reward was even greater, one he could not have earned in a year. Now, it turns out he had no objections, right? He took the dive plan from her, read it, and thought, if he gets this reward, Mari will be able to go to school until they have to do a long dive until the moment they completely clear the dungeon. So they will only be able to arrange 3 short-term short dives that will be enough for him to agree to the offer. And he also said that he doesn't see any other groups on the list except theirs. Yuika said that Twilight Sword is a group that operates independently, while for regular groups they go to. They had to gather to the unknown parts of the dungeon. Other groups are too slow for them, and this increases the risk of monster ambush attacks. However, Twilight Sword is a group of 4, and in the past they have already cleared many similar dungeons. Twilight Sword is a team strong enough to simultaneously challenge several large leagues. That's how they always worked. Operated and how they plan to act next. The protagonist said he would briefly familiarize himself. He familiarized himself with the dive plan. He introduced himself and extended. He extended his hand and said that he accepted their request. West extended her hand in response and stated that then he can call her by her name. He said he couldn't wait to work with her. West firmly shook his hand and with a friendly smile replied that F. Their mood was mutual. He was surprised that she smiled. He did not expect it. She said that she would gladly set off right now. And she needed to replenish her supplies of tools and potions. He asked if she could recommend a good shop, to which he agreed, but she wanted to go where travelers liked to frequent, and she said that in these circles they were well known. They cannot even come close to such places, so much so that she cannot even breathe properly. Today she wants to avoid all this. He said that popularity is pure constant pain. He thought that being a celebrity was not so easy. He clarified, equipment preparation is a separate payment. She replied that it does not matter, she will just leave everything to him. After this they walked around the city and bought various necessary things. He said that finally they had gathered everything they needed. She thanked him. And he, by the way, asked if she minded having dinner. Told that his younger sister would be there. Yuka did not object and agreed to it. Later they came to his house. Mari met them, introduced herself, and said that she was 4 years old. She was years old. She called him by name and asked if this was his dog. Although there had been almost 20 years of agreement before, he said that she was his sister. The difference between them is that she could simply address her by name. She sat opposite, smiled kindly, introduced herself, and said that she would work together with her brother. He confirmed this and said that they would dive together, starting from tomorrow. After that they went to the restaurant. The waiter brought them dishes and thanked them for waiting. Mari happily said that it would be tastier if eaten like this. She looked at her. He approached her and thanked her for the advice. MC looked at them and thought that he hadn't seen her like this for a long time. When he decided to take her to dinner at a restaurant, he had no idea that they would get along so easily and well. The waiter brought him ale and Yoika asked if it was beer. He nodded and said that it went perfectly with the local food. To drink this, she said, even when I turned 16 and was allowed to drink, I never tried alcohol. All before, he offered her juice, and as soon as it was brought, she began drinking her juice. She said in a satisfied voice that she really liked this juice, and he was already about to say something about it. But she quickly tilted it, raised her hand, and asked for a mug of ale. Then she began to drink alcohol. And added that she was already 20 years old, of course, she could drink beer. He was surprised that she drank a whole mug in one gulp, but immediately. As soon as it happened, she immediately felt worse. In the morning, she woke up in bed and wondered if it was already morning. It was not clear from here. It did not seem like it was her room. She felt a headache and remembered that she once had dinner with him and his younger sister. Eureka remembered yesterday how she drank a mug of ale. She hugged Marie and said that she was so sweet. She sat her on her lap, began to stroke her head, and whispered that Marie was like an angel. She now needed to call her sister again. She felt very uncomfortable about it. He grabbed her by the head and thought about what she had done. What kind of bitter drink is this? And this completely knocked out all her reason. She was so sweet. So she tried to be a good sister. She heard their voices and immediately saw him. Caught sight of their things and wondered, is she in their house? She put on shoes. He was already about to leave the room and thought that in any case, she should apologize for all the inconveniences. She left the room. She was swarming and washing the dishes. Pay attention to her. He said to her hello. Mari approached and bowed. And greeted her once again. Yueka greeted her with. Slightly embarrassed and thinking that she was still sweet, she sat down in front of her. He said that she apologized for her behavior yesterday. Yesterday, it seemed her actions were greatly hindering her. He arranged the plates of food on the table and said that everything was fine. She would have run away as soon as she felt uncomfortable. She sat like this, so humbly settled on her lap only because she really liked her. They have to have breakfast all together, she with. Looking slightly confused, she replied that she could not accept this offer. But when Marie proposed it, she immediately rejoiced and agreed. When they finished eating, she said she needed to go and pick up their equipment from the Adventurers Guild. It would be difficult. She finds it hard to navigate alone, so she asked him to go with her. They left the house. She waved to them and wished them a safe journey, and then they reached the guild. Veiled, where the girl loudly asked in panic whether she need to drink, have some beer, and spend the night. There was nothing like that at his place that evening. She went shopping with him and returned. Only the next morning. There were no attacks there, right? Yuika said with a confused expression that there are actually no monsters in the city. She loudly and anxiously declared that she did not mean that. The protagonist, with a slightly confused expression, replied, He just let her rest at his home. The girl did not manage anything else, she just fainted in the shop. Earl sharply called him a predator, told him to shut up, and announced that he was fired, politely introduced himself and thought that probably she misunderstood something. She stood between them with an irritated face, growled angrily and called Bari, ordering her to calm down. They hired that Sherpa, and she seemed to him as if she had a sister complex. The man with a serious face quickly ran down to him, apologized, and said that when she became the Black Princess, her reactions changed sharply. She began to behave completely differently. Wrong about everything. His name is Nuku. He plays in the shortstop position. MC looked at him with a smile and said he was glad to meet him. The mage flew up to him, grabbed his backpack with a staff, laughed, and declared that he would be a good anchor. He is magic and a sage who uses magic both for defense and for attack. He was very surprised when he heard his name and asked, "Isn't that the legendary traveler who was?" He was called a hero for 3 different feats, and he just laughed until Bari asked with an indignant look, "Did he just call him legendary? But he's just an old man who retired and came back." Again, Nuku said that, by the way, this man is her father. He was also over 60 years old and both. He boasted that he stood at the highest level among all. Ru was surprised. The man looked so young. Ruika approached him. He told her that she and Barry are warriors of light. She turned to Ruika and loudly blurted out, "Are you sure? Are you sure you want to take him with you?" She said calmly. "There, in the dungeon, we will discuss all these details." She was allowed to address the princess and ask her to wait, and then they asked to reconsider the decision. After some time, they went down to the dungeon. He reached the stairs, and the protagonist said that this is a shortcut for travelers of high level and above. This will lead them to the 14th floor. It's slippery here, let them be careful. As they were descending, he noted that their goal for today's journey is to reach the 47th floor. After the 3rd dive, they will be able to reach the dungeon core. Eureka said that the dungeon core is what spawns monsters in the dungeon. This will give them an incredible amount of experience. Clearing the Tyro's dungeon will also raise their level a bit. She called and said she believes he knows a bypass to the next. Stozes, on which floor is it? On the 19th, he replied. They must remember, on the way they will encounter a whole bunch of different monsters, and at the beginning, they will be awaited by monsters that hunt in packs. He listed them and emphasized that silver plates will be the rarest among all. She smiled and said that she understood him. This information was enough for her for now. She trusted him. Then she called Bari and Mazakin. They understood her too. She used magic on him and stated that it's not that she likes wasting her power on him. She needs to strengthen his legs, otherwise the whole group will slow down because of him. About him, MC asked in surprise, so this is a strengthening of his legs which, thanks to her wind magic, accelerates speed, she said, looking displeased at the boat under the sail. This is the name of this spell. He will need some time to get used to it. Ivica stepped forward and declared that they would run through all the remaining floors to the oasis. She gave the order to move. He moved forward and everyone quickly ran further, he with surprise. The expression on his face was amazing, as if everything happened too fast, and it loudly spoke for him. It seemed as if he was simply being carried by the wind. He called Mazik and asked what kind of magical circle he had just drawn. He smiled broadly and said it was a silvery, greasy coating, and then he began to explain exactly what kind. Let it be oil that covered his body, although it does not touch the back, and the rest of the body will repel any physical attacks. This surprised him, and he said he had never heard of such a cool thing. By the way, does he swim all the time? Meanwhile, he laughed and asked again about it. He loves chatting, right? If he keeps this up, soon he will run out of breath. Ari rushed forward with a serious expression and thought, if this Sherpa collapsed from exhaustion, it would even be better. Ro noticed a tunnel warned them, and she thought, although his face is calm now, Nuku is calling. He called the Black Princess and said they were approaching. 12 overhead and 7 ahead. Ivica called her and she rushed forward. She snatched the daggers and declared that the princess could leave everything to her. She rushed forward and decided that he would soon start crying and beg them for a break. She noticed applebees. These are monstrous insects the size of an apple, the acid they secrete from. Their stingers easily dissolve flesh. She handled these monsters with the daggers without any problem and thought, as soon as he starts complaining, she will definitely tell him that he is fired. Yuyuko was the central link. Link of the Twilight Sword. With her, they could get through everything. One of the monsters. The others rolled past the vanguard, and Nuku loudly called the Black Princess. She thought her beautiful princess does not need a man. She killed him herself. This monster with one strike of her sword end, loudly. They were told to go further and run the main hero with S. A slightly surprised look, he decided that the group had not stopped for a second. He had never seen Have you seen that? He glanced at the map and said that at the next crossroads they should turn left. Turn, she loudly ordered to stop. This excerpt is sealed. Is she sure there is no mistake here? He denied everything and stated, the correct path is the dead loop, to descend to the next. The next floor you can get there only through the snake corridor, to their left. Yuka called her and whispered that she just has to trust him. Nuku responded with a call in return. She immediately understood him and said that it is a trap. They are moving through the right passage. And it seems they are blocking the way, probably want to stop them at any cost. MC looked in that direction. He immediately stated that these are goblins. She looked at him and said. He said that these monsters blocked the right tunnel so people could not escape. Right there fleeing, a crowd of goblins ran towards them and she. With a calm expression, she said that he needs to hide behind the rock. He called Barry and reported that there are about 40 of them there. Let them go there. After listening to the advice, he hid behind the stone. Rock said that there are many inconspicuous places here so they need to be careful, she said in a calm tone. He replied that they would manage. He called her by name and asked if she really did not want to go with them. She is not worried, is she? Not worrying about anything, she calmly agreed and said that he could leave it. He told them and they rushed closer to the crowd of monsters. He pulled out several small stones, raised his hand, used the skill finger bullet and fired. He dealt with several goblins at once and said that now they have to go into the cave that remained there. He continued shooting. They threw stones and hurled words that only 13 monsters remained. To the left, with a stony calm on her face, she used the spell Wind Dance magic that instantly strengthens the power of the body of the one who wears it. She dashed forward, glanced to the side and she said she found 3 and immediately dealt with them. She destroyed these 3 monsters at once, with one strike very quickly. The first throw of her dagger was too swift. She muttered that she almost managed to catch it. In the room, she decided that he was also a goblin, but there are still those who know how to use their heads, and he calmly said that trouble might await them. Everything depends on how skilled they are in thinking. She said she would take care of those. Those on top, the rest of the team peeked from behind the corner and again. Roy thought that thanks to the local rather light moss he could see from a distance, their teamwork was simply impressive. Nuku destroyed G. The goblins were hit by a volley. Meanwhile, Bari moved towards the goblins, taking positions that were out of sight. Distance in the frame, for her being so close to the shooting, was terribly dangerous, but the armor was completely PRSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSS thought that this. In this battle, it was visible how Twilight Sword squeezes everything to the maximum from their individual qualities. This is truly the best team. Probably it's cool to be the chosen hero, they continued, running forward relentlessly, dealing with goblins on the way. On the road, she looked down and saw a necklace around. Grabbing the monster by the neck, she shouted it loudly. But she did not remember how she killed the goblin with a necklace collar. Fainting and death turned out to be in vain. He threw at her a part of another monster's body. He had to dodge while he tried to escape. Wei Nuku used the skill shot and said that he would not let him escape. After that, they called the princess and warned they were doomed. Mika turned around, called Mazik in and asked. He is ready, he said with. He already had a smile as if there really is a magic circle here. He poked his finger at the protagonist said that they have to take this boy with them. They moved on to where it seemed good for him, and he asked what he was going to do. He drew a magic circle in front of him and used the Earth Bridge spell. With this spell, he blasted a passage right in front of him so loudly that the echo rolled in all directions, and it surprised him a lot. When Bari asked what happened, she was already running. We could go back to him. He also asked next the labyrinth on the 20th underground floor. He agreed and clarified if he needed to. She had to return and collect the goblin magic course. She looked at him and said it was not necessary because it was not the best deed. Magic core is a mass formed inside the monster's body. By collecting it, you have the experience needed to rise in the rankings. She said that as long as when they caught up with her and blocked the way, the monster that appeared no longer changed anything. They have to move on. She will lead and he must not fall behind. He glanced at. He looked at her with slight surprise, then called Mazik in. He calmly asked what he wanted. The main character turned to him and asked if Twilight Sword had a tactic for conserving strength. He was a little surprised and asked why he decided that. He said that he was not talking about the team's overall policy, the structure of Twilight Sword. Considering the type of their actions and abilities, it seemed to him that this was a standard plan to lead 3 fighters in the vanguard. But in reality, everything was arranged so that she simply had no place to fight. During the last fight, she didn't move a finger, right? He quietly smiled and said he thought she was an ordinary guy. But it turned out he was very attentive. He thanked him for the compliment and said that, however. Moreover, he had already managed to calculate his true strength. Ivka called him by name. Said that there is nothing wrong with it. They have to make a short stop. Stopped at the 18th underground floor. Bari fell to the ground and said, like tea. How exhausted she was. She drank some water, agreed, and said that she has been running away from the very beginning without any pause. She called her and added that she tried so hard in the Tyro's dungeon. It seemed now she was even stronger than usual. She denied it with a confused look and decided probably to show her ability. Ro took out a small elixir and asked if she wanted to drink a recovery elixir. He noticed her reaction and did not understand why she was so upset. So Mazakin smiled. It seems this guy has an interesting idea. He called her by name. He said his name and asked if he had any other skills besides profit, right? With a smile, he replied that besides flying, he also has slow aging. No, profit is one of his special abilities. With it, you can learn the nature of an object just by touching it. It can be used on both people and things. Evrika said that the gift should be personal, but if he doesn't mind, could he tell her what kind of gift he prepared? He answered with a slightly dissatisfied expression. Evrika already knew about it, right? The only gift he had was endurance recovery. Nook wiped the sweat from. He looked at him and said that he had never heard of such a gift. Bari asked. He was asked what kind of gift it was. Musikin said that, roughly speaking, it was hard for him to get tired, the protagonist said. He explained that this gift is more common in monsters than in humans. This is what Sherpa needs because if he gets tired. Sherpa got tired and wants to rest, they will abandon him, right? She felt very uncomfortable and said that it made no sense. He replied with a barely noticeable smile. He showed that this was his gift. Eureka said with surprise that it was wonderful. In the previous dungeon, they had to adjust the pace. Everything depended on whether Sherpa was tired or not, but this time, they have nothing to fear. When endurance recovers, he may turn out to be much stronger. There is no doubt about this. Everyone wants to see it. He said, looking confused, that he was just Sherpa, and immediately asked, what will they do if he runs out of energy? She and Mazikun laughed and he replied that it was supposed to be that way. MC asked, do they also not get tired when endurance runs out? They need both food and water to stay in shape. She ignored this and asked on which floor the next labyrinth would be waiting for them. He thought that she probably wasn't listening to him at all, looked at the map, and said that it was on the 20th underground floor. On the floor, it's better not to leave the main road. Let them go straight to the 24th floor, where they will be met. He listed all the monsters living there and mentioned the manticore. The last monster finally caught her attention, and he said that the local king of fauna is found only on the 23rd floor, but that does not mean they will encounter him on their way. So they need to hurry. She considered everything, agreed with his plan, and said they would go there. It impressed him, and he said that some monsters are endowed with a special gift. Isn't it better to just avoid them? Nuku replied, that's not a problem. He could determine the number of monsters thanks to the gift enemy locator. If he knew their exact number, it would be much easier to deal with them. He caught Ro's gaze and immediately understood. Yes, that's exactly what Ro was thinking. He asked, anyway, they will follow her advice. Right, later they reached the 23rd floor and he said that soon there would be a manticore here. Moxnabu also lived here, so they need to be careful. They passed by and said that the ground here was quite moist. It even seemed a bit slippery. Bari stepped into some slime, told them about it, and asked, but why is it here? He said he heard from other Sherpas. They saw a moving labyrinth. It seems the slime is trying to imitate the labyrinth, right? Yuika asked if it was possible to use the enemy pursuit. He was snooping, searching for what they were moving towards. Nuku denied this and stated that he did not think any gift capable of that existed. No gift is capable of that. She asked if he knew where the slime was. She went ahead and said that it was somehow 2 Lie here. He heard a growl called her and he warned ahead a monster. They ran into a manticore and she said that with a smile, and here he is, the very manticore. This is exactly it. Right? The protagonist looked at him and asked, I wonder if the manticore always acts a bit. You alone? If so, it must be much stronger than other monsters living on the 23rd floor. Even monsters of the 35th level. She snatched the sword from. He drew the sword from the sheath with a smile and said he needed to go and hide again behind the stones. He agreed, moved away, and wondered if she would follow him. This time we fight. She stepped forward and said they needed to attack considering his poor stance. She and Nuku Who would aim for the head, she should distract the manticore. Bari agreed and said that, in his opinion, she would do exactly that. He would pretend to be stuck. The monster growled loudly and she covered her car with a dance of wind and the spells of the sailor. Comrades both dashed aside, leaving her standing in place, and the monster lunged forward. It looked at her in surprise and thought that thanks to the dance of the wind and the spells of the sailing forces, it could leap onto the cliff in one jump. He noticed that she was stuck and became worried, but had no idea how she would manage to fight. Right when the monster ran up so close, her allies jumped into an inconspicuous place. Nuku used she. He pronounced the spell with a shot and scattered many stones that drove them forward. There was no trace left of the manticore. The monster froze. Snakes. Her head opened and she began to draw magic into her mouth. Ari looked at this with an expression of surprise on his face and touched her face and said that it was lightning magic. Azakin, with a quiet smile, also began. He used magic and said there was nothing to be done. He cast the dirt bridge spell. The spell worked and created a barrier in front of her, protecting her from the. He did not stop from the magical attack of the monster Nuku and continued to hit stubbornly without pauses. A strike from a fair end, she snatched a dagger, declaring she would support him. MC watched from there, from behind cover. He caught his breath and paused for a moment. What if Yuika really did not intend to kill him? Even if it was a manticore, he felt that Twilight's sword was acting deliberately. She did not intend to hurt him. Judging by what she said, it seemed as if they were being forced. The monster stepped into the slime and even a mandrake could have gotten stuck there for at least a second. She really wanted to. At this moment, Nuku aimed at the monster to set a trap for it. And he said that he believes at least one of her paws will tighten. She stood beside and said that when Barry ran, it was clear she did not know where to place her foot. It seemed as if she was trying to avoid the slimal bait unconsciously. Involuntarily, a question spun in his head: how to catch the manticore so that it would stop, and what if he directed it to where the slime would be inevitable? The slime tried to escape. The manticore had already crept here. The only way for the slime to get out of here was to squeeze through a narrow passage that the manticore simply could not pass through. There should have long been a pile of slime there. The only problem was that now he had to find that passage, and all this in such darkness. Dark and large territory. He noticed moss flying nearby and decided only one passage leads here. Turned out like this, where the moss was flying from a dead end. That is there. There is a small crack here. It was not on the map if you look from both sides. From both sides, he loudly called to her and said that there was still space here with a pile of slime porridge up to the knees. The manticore would definitely get stuck. She was behind him on that foot of the wall. She agreed with some surprise, and Nuku said. He said, however, that they had not yet explored those places and knew nothing about them. About this, Bari loudly asked how he could know that it was exactly there if he hadn't seen it. He himself had not been there. Rose said that there was no need for that since they already had a plan map in their experience. He told them this as their Sherpa. Yuyuko was a little surprised by this, then smiled and loudly said that they needed to drive the manticore in that direction. Her team agreed, and their attack was aimed so that the monster would be thrown exactly where he indicated. She shouted. He caught up with her and asked where exactly that place was. She ran further and he rushed after her, clutching the map. He raised the map on his arm and said that it was exactly between the rocks. As soon as they got there, the monster really ended up in that place. There was a continuous slippery swamp and he immediately got stuck in it. She realized this was exactly the right moment. They rushed at the monster. He used the phantom needle technique. Bit into the monster's head with its blade and jerked back sharply. Turned to them and smiling said it was done. It's an incredible Sherpa. She looked at the praise a little confused and thought, along with that, she really hit the target. The manticore would not die from a single strike. He noticed the monster when behind her back a sound rose. He loudly called out and warned of danger. Another part of the team froze in place. And Nuku calmly said that he didn't need to worry about it. After all, he knew the prince's patronymic, right? Right after he heard the refusal, he declared that her patronymic was Messenger of the Dead. Spirit, she had a gift. She could control creatures she cut with her sword, the protagonist. He was shocked and saw how the manticore bowed before her. Yuyukyu laid the sword on the monster's shoulder and said it would be named Nico. Bari, surprised, said that it was simply the worst name in history. Nuku stood nearby and agreed because he was curious about what was that name. She turned to them, stroked the manticore's head and said she had a rather useful ability. Nah. They need to move on so that their target is on the 47th. Underground floor. Where to next? He thought and said that it seemed they needed to go to the 20. On the 25th floor they continued their path, and he thought about the victories of Twilight's sword and the manticore. They were spectacular, worth seeing. Nico captured every monster she met. She applied her gift to them, step by step building her own army. Within a day, there were dozens of monsters there. Monsters, the Twilight Sword's team of monsters. They are reaching the 40th floor where they encountered a minotaur, its body like a human's. A man with a bull's head and incredible strength bordering on legend, exceptional and endurance, thick muscles, and high resistance to blows. When this monster was exhausted after fights with other monsters, Yuika approached him and used the skill Phantom Needle. She called it Minoran and said that taming this monster is not an easy task. Together with Nika, their task is to scout enemy positions. They continued on foot, and MC pondered how they first met. In Sherpa Guild, she stated that Twilight Sword is a team of 4 people, strong enough to simultaneously match several large league groups. When he heard this for the first time, he thought it was complete nonsense, but now he had no doubts about their strength. They encountered 15 skeleton warriors, intelligent monsters with swords and shields, who formed groups and moved together. Ivica, with a serious face, called Nico and Minoran and said they needed to deal with the advanced ones. The enemy is already pressing. BU4 must retreat under cover. Nuku and Bari encircle the opponents and exhaust those whom BU5 and BU7 pushed back and bypassed. They immediately agreed, and Ro stood aside thinking. The powerful abilities of each party member and the destructive power of monsters unquestionably make Twilight Sword the strongest team. In Ro's field of vision, a skeletal warrior core suddenly fell. It hit the floor, and Ro focused on it. Then a thought about monster achievements flashed through his mind. This is a type of equipment that drops. And it is precisely these when monsters are already defeated, knocked out of place by blows, so Ro began collecting them, deciding that he must give them away. When they finished fighting the monsters, he thought about gathering them all at her place and about their rank. The ranks were replenished by 7 skeleton warriors, so now there were 17 monsters in the squad. Mika looked at them attentively and said what it was. It seemed the time had come to heal the wounds and cheer everyone up. He slightly stirred up the monsters, and she began to use it. Use magic and say that they all must stay in their places. She drew a large magical circle over the crowd of monsters and cast a healing spell. It impressed him, and he said he had never seen such a magical circle. Mazakin said with a smile, "This is a gift from the Princess Healing. Usually such magic is applied to other monsters only by monsters." He could not believe it and thought, could it be that she also has such magic? When the spell reached the monsters, their wounds healed very quickly. And he decided that this was synergy gained thanks to compatibility of gifts or a combination. This is called Renka. Simply put, Phantom Needle is used to manipulate monsters, and healing is used to restore the physical strength of these monsters. This is the best Renka. She is the best adventurer specializing in labyrinth capture. Yuika turned to them and asked if it was time for them to rest too. His team agreed, and he felt that someone among them had special feelings for this amazing leader. Those who held on like a royal vassal, and those who held on as if Sue. Everyone was ready to act so that Jarenka would be safe. She pointed to the dark cave and said that they needed to continue the path to the next floor a little later. They continued to dive deeper into the dungeon, and he thought, when planning a dive, the most important thing is the party level. Each floor corresponded to its own level, exactly the one needed to pass it considering the adventurer rank. Rank's Twilight Sword party was at level 12, and Manticore's hunting grounds on the 23rd floor corresponded to level 6. Minotaur 40th floor corresponded to level 13. They cleared both floors without any problems. The dive report needed to note that the entire process took only 2 days. Usually it would take 10 days, and such an incident would definitely cause a stir. While they were settling in, their camp was set up near the oasis on the 47th floor. The current floor was 47 and the corresponding level was 15. Monster hunting had been going on for 4 days, and it was here that they encountered creatures with the skills they had. He had a human torso and a snake-like lower body. It was cruel, used sharp claws as weapons, and had incredible physical strength. The strength was impressive. The protagonist said that monsters living at such depths were capable of destroying an entire squad. So they should be careful. Iveca smiled confidently and said they had nothing to fear. He ordered to bring 6 skeletons, let them guard. These monsters stopped and immediately rushed forward. They barely held the attack. Skill attack nails with the help of shields, but the snakes also began biting their legs. She loudly declared that it was in vain. Since the poison did not affect her subordinates, she turned to her on the 7th and ordered them to break through their flank. Skeleton immediately listened to her words. Bounced off the cliff, rushed at the monsters, and struck one of them. In the back he stabbed with a sword, but could not pierce the hide. Skin, however, after his attack, a powerful explosive wave occurred which killed. Monster MC watched this in surprise from the side, and and wondered, is this a gift of influence? Nuku raised her eyes and loudly said, this is. Something was coming through the ceiling. Bari also looked and loudly said what it was. That it was a huge slime. He also looked at it and loudly said, it is slime. Slime is capable of dissolving even metal. Ivica immediately shouted, stay away from this monster. When everyone scattered, he immediately said, close combat will not work. He called Oink from first to fourth and declared that they must keep their distance and strike with spears, Mazik and. He called Black Princess and said that the skills had already broken through the defense. Immediately from 5 to 8, she called Oink and ordered them to deal with them. Ro looked at this and decided she would deploy her monsters considering their special abilities. Thanks to this tactic, the whole party retains strength and it is truly wonderful. He called her and said that the moon echoes so loudly here. If the fight drags on, other monsters will come to the sound and arrange a real carnival here. Note, this is what they call a situation when hordes of monsters converge in one place and stretch out a series of battles. Battles? She stopped and asked which of the already gathered monsters would be the most problematic. He replied that, in his opinion, these were jelly toads and the underground garrison. Mazikin glanced aside, smiled and said, by the way, something is approaching. They are sneaking up. Bree heard the rumble of approaching monsters and shouted loudly, and discussed that these were jelly worm toads. These monsters knocked down their victims with a continuous stream of liquid accumulating on their bodies. Ivica looked at the monitor. She looked at the monsters and asked, it's like a water cannon, right? And called Nico. Nico said she needed to use the lightning trap spell because everyone was already in danger. Neutralize them. The manticore did it and all the frogs were paralyzed, she said with a calm smile. That lightning magic works well against water monsters. She called Minoru in. Said he had to kill them with one blow. The Minotaur. The animator stepped forward, swung his huge axe and struck the monsters. With the flat side, he was stunned by what happened and she turned away and said, this is much bigger F. He dealt with them one by one and just then Nuku, Black Princess, was summoned and informed that 4 more were approaching. The hero became worried, called her and said that on this floor, 4 monsters were hiding. Probably it was a garrison. They formed squads so their defensive line seemed to have no gaps left. At that moment they were 2 formidable opponents. An indescribably cold gust of wind blew near them. Ari shivered from the cold and asked if it was snow magic. Nuku looked away and said that the orc and the slime trail Prince Weref. They were frozen. Mazikin laughed as soon as he saw several silhouettes in the darkness. And he said how lively this carnival is, an underground garrison that was. With lesser demons armed with various equipment thrown on the lower levels came to join them. Ivica raised her sword and said with a smile that they have a mage and that's all. It seems he is also skilled with the sword. Bari called the princess and asked what they should do with these skills. She said that she and Nuku need to work on them and help the skeletons, and also to be careful with snake venom. With a joyful smile, she asked the princess if she could heal her if the monsters bit her right, she would run to fight other monsters called Nico. Echo and Minoran say that after some time they will need to recruit them into their army. They stopped in an oasis on the 47th floor, the host. C said that this carnival gave him goosebumps and it seems now he finally understood why they constantly had such unusual trophies. Ivica laughed, picked him up and said that, however, he gave them all 4 only thanks to him. The appearance of stronger monsters was their goal, that way they could strengthen their armed forces. She started eating soup and added, by the way, he cooks deliciously and she simply adores this soup. He was glad to hear this and told Yoku that. He said that it was a miracle to be able to eat salad so deep underground. He turned to him with a smile and said, after all, they were moving at a fast pace. He heard the kettle boiling and said that Sarbo tea was already ready. He handed her a cup of tea and pondered. And thought that if counting the manticore under her command there were a total of 50 monsters, with extra. Her facial expression showed she was completely exhausted. A potion would help but it seems F. First she needed to restore her strength with tasty a gem. He began cutting meat and said that the main thing. One of the courses smoked meat, tastes better if sliced thinly but Marie prefers to eat it like this. She chews it in a sandwich and with an expression of surprise said that she told him this while they were eating together. Together, he smiled and said that of course they often do this at home and she remembered the time spent with him. Girl with a smile on her face and blushed with embarrassment. Harassment, he said that while she was sleeping his sister was pulling. She was having a lot of fun, she would mind is playing with her again, she agreed with a very happy expression on her face. The expression on her face and they continued talking. Mary looked at them from the side and thought about that eternally cold beauty that impresses and fascinates about the flawless print. Can a princess make such a face? What kind of freak did this? When they finished. Having finished washing the dishes, Mazakin asked, since the meal is over, it's time to check what they got. Maybe he will lay out everything they collected on the ground, Roy agreed. They freed the trophies and laid out on the ground everything they took from the monsters. Everyone ran to look, and Bari was sitting right there. They are eating soup, he said. The lower the floor, the more variety there is. Elements, Nuku asked, slightly surprised. How did he manage to gather all this? He calmly said that he just found the time. This is the time between battles, to pick up what has fallen and collect demonic cores. That's his job. He said this with a tense look. The fact that he pronounced everything so evenly, but gathered everything himself without outside help, was incredibly difficult, a gift of endurance. Stamina recovery simply unreal. He even asked, as if casually, did he really think so? Mazakin looked over what they had obtained and said that it seems half of it will really be useful. The armor and weapons of monsters are cursed, so those who wear them will have a very hard time. Yueka asked if it was made by the Dark Blacksmith. The main character replied, yes. By the way, he heard that dark blacksmiths forge high-class equipment from ore mines and dungeons. Some of them are even capable of forging magical items, imbued with gifts and specific effects. Note, the dark blacksmith is a special type of lesser demon that arms humanoids living deep in dungeons. He said that dealing with cursed items is deadly dangerous. They lower status and also exhaust physical and magical power. Therefore, all parties reject such items. She said that this will not bring income. No benefit on the surface. They heard the demons say that it was. It was simply offensive. They had put their soul into it. Hearing this, the team immediately became worried. He heard her and loudly warned about the danger behind. The demon pressed a knife to her throat and ordered like this. But people cannot afford the monster, called it a premium service. They called the princess with frightened voices, and the demon said, such types of weapons are incredibly effective for killing adventurers. He loudly declared that he must immediately release the princess. They immediately prepared for battle, and she was about to ask something. Something and everything froze. The demon jerked away from her, jumped over, and stopping asked, are you asking him? And she would have to listen very carefully. He has no name, those dark smiths, he was just mentioned. He is already among them. What a relief. He didn't have to talk to people for long. For a long time, MC looked at him and thought, this is definitely strange. There shouldn't be monsters here that can talk, according to the records. Although high-level monsters have language knowledge, they do not speak, they act only on instinct. There is no point in talking, especially with those who have already become victims. This is not the only thread. Strange thing, all team members rushed to the princess and called her. She called Nuka, clenching her face in anxiety, and asked what happened to his detection skill. Nuka replied that he did not know. He did not feel demonic energy at all. Mazakin with a serious face asked, this guy, can he and doesn't have it? The demon approached the controlled monsters and said that if you think about it, they were from the upper floor. Why come down here? She ordered the first and immediately the first and second, to grab him immediately. After that, the monsters attacked the dark blacksmith, and he skillfully avoided their attacks and loudly said that it was very close. He caught Ro's attention. He closely watched the steps of this demon. He again closely watched this, once more. They dodged the monster's attack, and they were summoned by a court subpoena. He was gone, and everyone froze in surprise. Near Evika, he suddenly appeared, stepped on the blade of her sword, and pressed it to the ground. This surprised him, and he immediately decided that it was teleportation. He leaned toward her with a smile and said this, so it turns out she controlled them. He shuddered and loudly asked what was wrong with him. He jumped back from her and said, well, deadly aura, quite terrifying. He teleported right to her and uttered this. But only he met them here. He patted him on the shoulder. He touched the shoulder and asked, as if saying if he hadn't pointed a gun at him, they could have become friends. He turned to him. He looked at him with a smile and said that he was pleased, so he would answer a few questions. He asked with a confused expression on his face, so he is looking for an answer. Smile. A smile appeared on his face, and he said that he was quite an interesting person. I liked it, but unfortunately, he still had to deliver it. Make it so that he cannot stay, they will drown. A little lower to the right, and they will definitely have a chance to meet again. They must not perish and must remain. Rotten corpses, people are so interesting, especially those who died recently. He was about to. He disappeared, and Bari asked the princess if she was okay. Eureka kept a calm expression on her face. Yuku came closer and said, as if everything was fine. She assured that it happened for the first time. They met a monster without demonic energy, which means nothing can be done anymore. The main character replied that they already knew this. It is a dark blacksmith, but there is no record of his abilities in the Sherpa guild. She said that she had never met anyone like that in other dungeons. In the dungeons of Tyros, there were monsters they did not know. Them clearing the dungeon completely is a risky business. Fact, it was a test of their determination as adventurers. Adventurers, he thought with a slightly tense face that. But the level of risk turned out to be much higher than they had imagined. She said with a smile that it was. It was quite interesting, and her desire to clear this dungeon only grew. The best thing that happened to them in these 4 days of monster hunting. A secret passage led down to the lower floors. It seemed they just needed to go down to the 48th floor, he asked. They asked with surprise, hadn't they agreed on that only then? They agreed on the 47th floor. She turned to him and said that they would make changes to the contract. She smiled and added that she did not want to interrupt the dive after what that monster did to her. To her, MC said that no one had ever stepped on the floor below. There were not only monsters there but there was no information about this place at all. They needed to get to the surface and replenish supplies before moving on. That was his advice, like the Sherpas. She agreed and asked again. She understands this, but just as. So what? How could one of the Twilight Sword Squad not be confident that he could endure, pass through, and explore the 48th floor? He looked confused. He thought that when she said that, it meant they work as a team, and he, the legend. The legendary sage, did not use any offensive magic at all, so Mazuakin yawned loudly and said that. After such a heavy meal, he was drowsy. He sighed and thought, in other words, they still have an ace up their sleeve. He took a deep breath and said that it was unfair because he had nothing to respond with. She smiled apologetically and said that she felt he would listen to her decision until the end. Decision? He was confused and asked again, what does that mean? So this is how. How does she manage everything? She laughed and asked, smiling, does he really think so? Yuri, angry at their conversation, jumped between them and loudly declared that Twilight Sword is capable of dealing with anyone. Anyone could have done it any time and without his help, and that threw him off track, so he muttered that he probably had no choice anyway. He would just listen to her. He said it was wonderful and then let them set off into the unknown later. They descended to the 48th floor of the dungeon, and he thought, this is a dive into an. What had never been on the map was approaching. He said that the luminous moss was very high. And here a lot of mana concentrated, but this surface is not the best support, take it. Harry threw out with a contemptuous half-smile, as if, by the way, now that they are already here, there is almost no use in it. Now he was incapable of anything, right? Roy agreed and thought that as soon as he arrived on the floor where no one had ever set foot. It had already become customary. Sherpas were used to relying on the experience and instincts of travelers. First, they needed to draw a map. They also needed to take notes about the surroundings. They went further, and Barry called the princess and said, reach the oasis here. They reached it, and Nuku said that he had. He noticed the monster ahead, and Bis caught her attention. And she asked if it was higher than the oasis. She looked there and, surprised, said that she actually saw something, a huge grape cannon. Even if there was something here, she was sure, it made no sense and was completely uninteresting. On the way here they did not encounter any monsters, and she confidently pulled further. Someone still burns with the desire to pass through this place. She could tell me if they had already found the oasis, the very one that means the goal is achieved, Ueka. Monica agreed and stated that they needed to rest a bit and then return to the surface. The protagonist cast an interested look at this, and Bari even shone, as if the answer had already been born in his head. They said that then this plant must be cut down. The night seed that this monster dropped could be such. It was sold for a very good price because it was for regenerative medicine, so he continued to look around. He looked at it and decided, the vine cannon is a common plant mob. Monster, it was worth looking closer, and it attacked travelers too. Throwing seeds from its tubular pods at them, even novices could easily defeat this monster. What is this plant, which usually lived on the upper floors, doing here? Its leaves and tubes are a bit different. He turned to them and said loudly, this is not a sample rifle, do not touch it. But as soon as he said this, Bari had already bitten off a piece of this monster. Monster's vine. Immediately after that, a powerful explosion thundered. A bunch of thorns flew off the plant and hit him, and he felt his strength leaving him. These thorns were poisoned. He treacherously called the others with a tired voice and asked if they were okay. He saw the whole team. The participants were injured, they could not even move. He fell to the ground and thought that. He thought he was just getting cold, but his hands and feet did not obey at all, they did not move. Body seemed to melt, dissolve. Is this death? Yuyuko approached him. She cast the spell Dark Dewdrop. She pronounced his name and called out so that he would wake up. He heard her voice. Her voice broke off and immediately consciousness returned. She sharply got up and shouted loudly. For her, she said that she had cast a healing spell, so poison must disappear from his body, it seems she He removed all the thorns from him, but he still needed to check again just in case. He thanked her, asked her to wait, and inquired if she. He pulled him out with her bare hands and said that he shouldn't worry about it. He put the backpack on the ground and said that, still she was bleeding, he would give her a healing elixir. She objected. Now is not the time. It was visible how the poison was rapidly spreading throughout the body. Though first they needed to save the others, he rushed after her and reached out. He offered his help, looked around and pondered. The oasis disappeared as if it evaporated. How large it was. It was an explosion. If not for the effect of the silvery oily coating, they would definitely have died. They approached Bari, examined her, and he decided that it was terrible. He managed to protect her eyes, but the rest. Her face and body, he called her and said that she must use. He used tweezers. I took them from him, agreed, and to get out. As soon as they finished, they both started pulling out the needles. Then I cast magic on her and she quickly recovered consciousness. Yuka called her and asked if she was okay. She nodded and he handed her a vial of potion and asked her to drink. Drink this. Mazikin flew up to them and shouted, Black Princess, and said that she should not forget about him. If I die here, the world will not survive this loss. They were surprised. Only one needle hit him, and he replied that it was. It was good that he had the gift of amplification on his cloak. Later they also healed Nuka. She looked exhausted. He said that only monsters remained, and MC approached closer. He approached her, gave a dose of potion. She thanked him and said she would place an order. He ordered them to guard her. Mazikin rushed to Bari and gently hit her on the head with a stick. He addressed the staff and assured, this is the best moment to apologize. He called him an irritable old man, but still listened and apologized. Yuka approached them and said that only Roa felt the danger, so she was not to blame. Healing magic is a thing only a few can master. So if it worked for the Black Princess, it turns out he himself would say he would do the same. In any case, for an ordinary plant monster, he had too much strength and poison. It could be that it was. Bare floor, he said that usually they consider plants weak, but now they will have to change their mind. Everyone instantly turned around as soon as Yuka fell to the ground, and WH reached her. Bari picked her up in his arms and asked anxiously what was wrong with her. He sat down nearby and said that it must be because of poison. She was surprised by this and loudly declared that it was impossible. The princess has resistance level 3. She is sturdy. He was unwavering, not only to burns or stun, but to any influence at all, and he was sure that this was true already at level 3. This resistance could withstand almost everything, yet still did not reduce the probability to 0 by 100. More precisely 100. He asked exactly that, after which she no longer applied dark dew drops on herself. Nuku said firmly with a tense face, it does not work on a magic caster. This confused him. He noticed that her breathing was weakening, so he warned, if it continues like this, her life will be in danger. Does anyone have medicine or potion against poison? He did not count on anything and did not replenish supplies before going out. Bari said that they do not need Twilight Sword medicine. They no longer had anything left. There were so many poisons that the empty space was filled with potions to somehow restore mana. He weighed everything in his head and eventually it became clear. Their plan relied entirely on Yuika's physical condition. He noticed she was trying to say something. He moved closer and asked what had happened. She was writhing. He was tormented by pain, and at some point he decided that her speech had become incomprehensible. Listen, he said that soon she would start to delirium. Mazikin remembered something and, speaking aloud with anxiety, faltered. It was subtly shown this is bad. He stopped using levitation and stepped away from them, the protagonist. He saw this with his gaze and understood. He was going where Mom was. Monsters guarded them. He sneaked up on these monsters and with some serious expression froze on his face, he used a beam. About the banishment of light, he was sure it would work. He waited for the spell to end and blew up all these monsters. This surprised him and he asked why they needed to be removed. Nuku said, if the Black Princess loses consciousness, the effect of the Phantom Needle will disappear, and he immediately understood this. He thought that then all these monsters would surround them. Even such a devastating gift has a weak spot, he said. He promised that he would heal her and added, first they need to take the backpack. He laid out his tools and various potions nearby, and said that he was not sure if it would help, but he would try to mix some medicine. Medicine, she must be laid horizontally on the ground. He poured something into a mortar and ordered to start with stimuli. Stimulator, he brought a finger with medicine to her face and said that it would be wonderful. It would be wonderful if the sharp smell could wake her up. The week has already begun. He reacted with sounds to the smell but was still unconscious. MC looked at her and thought that her breathing was still weak. He needed a cardiotonic. He prepared it and decided that it should be mixed with. Take some water and give it to her, just in case, he said he needed to. I need to ask something, is any one of them dating her, Bari A? With a confused expression on his face, what is he talking about? He took. He held the medicine in his mouth and asked, does this mean no? She froze in surprise and he leaned over her end. He moved her to Wiku and stubbornly poured her medicine into her mouth. She swallowed the medicine with a kiss. Nuku noticed her approaching them and ordered to stop. Stop, she stepped back, took him aside, managed and put the medicine in her mouth. Said that she would do it. He asked her to wait and said that there is a trick to make an unconscious person drink medicine. She did not listen and it made her cough loudly. He immediately became worried. He said exactly that, it was the same line but this time it didn't work. Princess, he thought with a worried look that the poison had weakened her heart, so a cardiotonic should have helped, but he no longer had it, that's true. He holds a candy made from mental strength, which was obtained from potion. It was created to strengthen the mind so that she would stay conscious. He crushed the candy with a stone into powder, poured it into her mouth, and that's it. He also splashed water, poured the medicine into her mouth. Nuku called him with an anxious face. And asked if he was sure about this medicine. He looked at him, started taking off his outerwear, and said that honestly, he didn't know that it's not enough for proper treatment. They need to return to the surface as soon as possible and find someone who can cure her from. With magic, does anyone know spells that enhance endurance? He covered her with his cloak and Mazakin said he could use a few spells at a basic level. The main hero explained, then you have to cast it on her sometimes, otherwise when the effect of the medicine wears off, this will be the end for her. He picked up Wika in his arms and Bari stretched out hers and assured that she could carry the princess. He looked at her and said that even if on the way here they destroyed most of the monsters, he was sure many still remained. She, together with Sir Nuku, had to be ready for anything and she agreed with that. After that, they all rushed to the exit of the dungeon. He ran alongside her. She asked if he was sure he could manage without a map. He replied, he remembers the way they are going. There were no problems. He guided him in the direction. He asked him to wait, muttering that he sensed two monsters. Wait, they are just above them and their number is increasing. This is blood. Bedbug cockroaches note, these monsters suck blood from the still living. Only live victims lay eggs there. They are incredibly fast, he called her. He asked if she could cast a sales spell on them. She agreed and he loudly said, but then they need to get rid of that witch. Faster, he thought they needed to get to the surface as quickly as possible. They continued moving. He kept running along the 48th floor, looking into Yuika's face and thinking about saving other lives. Others and again endure unbearable pain from the poison, but she had incredible abilities. Holding her tighter, he lost track of time again and thought he would not let her die in such a place, although sometimes he still had to think the same way. A little later, on the 41st floor of the dungeon, they took a short break and MC said he gave her a dose of sedatives. Because of this, she was only one step away from death. This will prevent the poison from spreading further through her body. They were very worried and Mazikun calmly explained, this slows the blood and it begins to clot. After all, this was originally used as a poison. Does he want to use this effect to block the action of another poison? He agreed and said they only had to wait. Iveka opened her eyes. Everyone immediately noticed this and, without hesitation, shouted to the princess, and she very quietly asked where they were, Bari and Nukud. He did not understand what she had just said and replied that now they were on the 41st floor. They had to go there. To get to the surface and take her to the healer. He gave her some medicine, but later she would need to drink more. It must be. It was incredibly hard, but she had to learn to breathe. Everything depended on her determination to live. Live, she tried to say something, but the words fell apart in fragments. He asked with a barely noticeable smile. Does she mean that in terms of willpower she is the best here? That was expected of her, so she needed to keep the pace. He began to stand up and Nuku shouted. He lunged at him and said that although he has the gift to restore endurance and also carries, all of this was too much for him himself. Is it really better to throw away the backpack to move faster? He picked her up in his arms and said that he was going to do it immediately as soon as his legs got tired, but they were still holding. The goal was still far away, so there was no reason to panic. She called him by name. He turned to her and asked what happened. She slowly tried to say something, dragging the words with a very tired voice. He immediately understood. She is asking why he is helping so sincerely. Rose said that there is no sense here at all. But there was a special reason. Was it really necessary to save the person he loved? Her surprise and facial expression. Ari's face turned red. It angered him. He grabbed the other by the shoulder and loudly, probably asked how dare he say such a thing at such a time, and yet he asked calmly. Although he could look so angry, it turned out she still had a lot of strength left, right? She was confused by this. And he turned around and asked Nook how he was feeling. He said everything was fine and added, if needed, they should drink the potion that restores endurance. And now they moved on. After some time, Aveka came to in the clinic and, loudly surprised, asked, "What the hell is going on here?" The doctor, who used his magic on her, gasped in surprise and loudly said, "This is a clinic." He had nothing to fear from his healing magic. She calmed down a bit and she reached the exit and said in a dissatisfied tone that since she could move, it was time for them to get out of here. Mazakin was sitting nearby. She apologized to him for the interference and sincerely thanked him for the help. It seemed to her that just a moment ago she was drowning in the depths of the dungeon chamber. She remembered almost nothing. She probably fainted on the way here. He called the Black Princess and said it was good that she was okay. She agreed and asked him to tell what exactly happened. He smiled and replied that she was so impatient. Even then, when she almost died, under the guidance of this young Sherpa, they managed to return to the surface in just one day. Of course, they tried with all their might to avoid a fight, but could she have imagined that they would escape from the 48th floor? They did not encounter anyone, only young. The young Sherpa looked unflappable even in such a situation. She asked where Bari and Nuka were now. He replied that they had been separated. While she was choosing the short path, there was only one exit, so she shouldn't have worried. He apologized and said that his daughter's recklessness almost killed her. Calmly, she looked back at the room and said, "Everything is fine, let her not worry." And she was also partly to blame. This wouldn't have happened if she had acted more cautiously. She recalled how the main character helped them in the dungeon and said that he really saved them. He agreed with. He smiled and added that this hero helped her the most. This young man passed the medicine mouth to mouth. She was quite embarrassed. And then he declared that Bari even counted how many times he did it. 7 times. He rushed to the exit and said he would pay the bill. Gold only for 1 spell, so here it is, robbery. She looked at him with a confused face. Did this really mean that she kissed him, or what? By the way, she could still taste the medicine. She was sure it was too bitter. Who would have thought that her first kiss? The kiss had a taste of medicine. At that moment, he ran to the clinic and called the doctor. The director asked how Yuika was feeling. He came to her room, spoke to her, but she paid no attention. And she thought she was living in some fantasy like other girls. But everything was completely different from what she imagined, although to save her life, so she should be grateful. But then he said there was no special reason. She is not sure what exactly he was trying to convey to her. Tell me, how can she now look him in the eyes? He approached her bed and called again. When she noticed him, she was embarrassed and loudly asked how long he had been sitting there. He calmly said that he had just arrived, and everything they got during the dive was left in the Travelers Guild. Both Nuku and Bari are resting at the inn. She, looking at him awkwardly, asked, "By the way, can she ask you something?" He agreed, and she has. He said uncertainly that his words are here, in the dungeon. She was interrupted. The doctor, who loudly called MC's name, and, pronouncing each word with dissatisfaction, stated that he cannot enjoy alcohol. While they were here, he already had to get them out of here. He turned to him and said that he does not consider it normal to drink during working hours. It was the best idea. The doctor asked him to be quiet. He turned to her, apologized, and said that he had always behaved that way. She can move, right? She agreed, and he said it was time for them to go. Then he left. Outside, he thanked the doctor, but the doctor just closed the door in their faces. They walked down the street, and he only said he would return as soon as he took them to the tavern. His sister was still with relatives, so they needed to pick her up from there. Lift her up. Yuka said that was right. First they needed to show Mari so she would calm down. He agreed. The man approached and said he recognized that noble appearance. Could it really be? And it really was him, Lord Sage. Mazikun turned to him and confirmed that it was so. She looked around and asked who he was. Ro called him Mayor Barraman, and he replied with a joyful expression that he was pleased. They got stuck in their heads when they reached that evening. He didn't understand what she was talking about, but she remembered. That day the 3 of them, she, he, and Mari, went to a restaurant. He asked if it was a neglected place, or if he interrupted something. She objected and said that the 3 short dives were at first planned, but they only finished the first one. Their goal remained unchanged, to completely clear the Tyro's dungeon. Now they had already reached the 48th floor. Still unknown, the report was to be submitted later. He didn't recognize her, and Mazikun said that she was the leader of the Extinguished Sword. Barraman was even surprised. So this is the Black Princess. She set a record in such a short time, it's incredible. He asked for permission to invite her again to another event, but didn't finish speaking. Yueka said she appreciates his kindness. Her mission is to go through and cleanse all the dungeons in this world. Miss Vithe looked at the main character and asked, by the way, who is he? He introduced himself and said he is from Sherpa Guild. He remembers it. He remembered him and said that he had heard he is very talented for such a young age. He thanked him. He said that although that was so, he was not worthy of such admiration, and with a smiling look added that the famous heroes of the East and the best Sherpa in the city, and he was simply fantastic. She called the mayor and said they needed to rest, so she apologized. Mazakin, smiling broadly, said that he did not mind skipping the dinner party. She apologized, called him, and all three set off. Berriman watched them with his eyes. Mazakin said that just a few days after the first dive, they explored a new level, and then he came. She visited Sherpa Guild and greeted Jim. Jim greeted her back the same way. He called him Little Barry and asked if she just wanted to find out who came at such a time. In an hour, he sighed with a smile and said that it was time for her to stop treating him like a child. He was already over 40. She was 40 years old and replied that his name was too difficult to pronounce. What did he want after all? He was silent for a few seconds, then she said that he was. Let him not worry, everyone had already gone home and she stayed here. He remained alone. He called himself MC and said that he was currently working with the squad, the Heroes of the East. He heard that they were exploring the dungeon at an abnormal speed. They had already reached the 48th floor. She agreed and said with a smile that they were aware. Now she was updating the maps in the guild, and as soon as he said this, she flinched in surprise. What he really wanted to talk to her about from now on was simple. She should reconsider her attitude towards him. She was already reaching to ask something, but he anticipated and said that after the death of his parents, the only family was his family was his younger sister. She asked how he knew this. He replied that Gunji told him about it in a bar. He spoke as if Marie was his sister. She did not like it. She clenched her fingers. He clenched her hand into a fist and asked, so what? He said it was nothing. He did not try to make her do anything about it. Twilight's sword was still a very important guest for them, but he had one demand. He asked to protect his sister. How much? How much could he disgrace his Sherpa pride? The next morning after the dive, Iveka knocked on Rose's door. He called him by name and asked if he was home. Marie heard. He heard her and with a joyful face said that it was the voice of her sister. He quietly smiled and asked to open the door. She did it immediately and replied, welcome. She greeted her with her own words. With a smile, he asked how she was. She immediately noticed the human silhouette. The silhouette was next to her and it suddenly popped out from behind the door, so she saw Nook, who unexpectedly turned out to be. He radiated a threatening aura that made her tremble. She apologized for. He said this and assured her she did not need to worry. He was her friend. Fear overwhelmed her like a wave, and then she was introduced. She herself told him her age. He stood silently and she called him and he immediately apologized. He bowed low, introduced himself, stated his age, and added that he was sincerely grateful for their acceptance. She was a little surprised by this, so she asked what he was doing here. There was no need to stick to her age. The protagonist approached, wiped his hands with a towel, and asked what had brought him. She brought them here, she said, and apologized for disturbing him so early in the morning. Good morning. She wanted to express gratitude to him, but he was eager to talk to him about the dive report. He allowed them to enter, and after some time Nuku came out of his house and said he was counting on him. He called the lady and asked her to return by sunset, otherwise Barry would get angry again. She agreed. When he left, she turned around, apologized, and said she didn't know. Supposedly they were going on a picnic. And disappeared so suddenly. He spoke in a calm voice that she didn't need to worry, everything was fine. The traveler's report and the Sherpa's report, if that doesn't add up, they will be called later to sort out the details. It's good that they managed to discuss everything before submitting their reports. She was a little surprised by his reaction, and said with a slightly dissatisfied expression that Nuku had always been very strict about this matter. It's true, she no longer remembered how many times she had heard him say that. It really was important. Mario approached her and, a little nervously, Hesh asked her sister if she wanted to join them for the picnic. Yuhiko was surprised and asked if she really could. MC nodded in response with a friendly smile and said she really wanted her to go with them. She thanked for the invitation and agreed to go with them. Later they came to me and said that she really wanted her to go with them. They arrived at the forest outside the city. She went ahead, called her sister, and said that here they collect Gajabarii and insisted on it. He urged her to hurry up, but she called her by name and pulled slower, saying, you can fall if you run like that. Mari stopped by the bush. She started picking berries and assured that they would make incredibly tasty jam. A little surprised, she added that she knows a lot about it, smiled happily, and confirmed she knows even more. For example, any rabbit can be sold for a good price, but if you mix those with good meat with those with bad meat, you won't expect big sales, and also the vegetables in the store opposite their house are always rotten. Her brother showed her all this. When Yuika looked at him with a very dissatisfied face and said so, it became clear that's how it is. He began to worry and thought that, well, he just wanted to teach her a few tricks that might come in handy in life. After some time, he probably overdid it. The girls fell asleep on the blanket. He looked at them, barely smiled, and thought that he was a father. It seems they both calmed down. He heard from Sir Mazakin, she can't sleep while the phantom needle is working. Now everything is clear. During the dive, she didn't sleep a single minute, and they spent almost a week in the cave. That's why their team avoids long dives. Then why did he choose exactly those words? Maybe the thought of how she suffered from the poison and had to rely on. Only by her own willpower did she make him feel she needs a reason to. Wait, of course you can explain it that way, but if it were really true. Case isn't it so, it can be found among many other words, right? For example, something about diving. He looked at her face and thought. He thought that she was incredibly beautiful. He also liked her courage. She encounters difficulties and how quickly she overcomes them. Me too, and that expression on her face when she sees Mari, it seems. He likes children, and also the willpower he saw in him. Dungeon, it seems now he understands. These words burst out completely. He let it slip exactly as his heart suggested, so. Now it is even easier for him to breathe. Ro called her by name and assured that his word. He closed his eyes and felt, now everything is clear to him. Suddenly Yuka woke up, grabbed him by the collar and with him. Embarrassed with such an expression on his face, he asked, is he telling the truth? Ruth now was confused because of this, agreed and she decided that it was truly a confession. She quietly asked, confused, not fully understanding. So there is more than one of them. She may have never been in a relationship, but she has a good idea of how it works so he can rely on her. His puzzled smile spoke for itself. It felt like their lives would soon change beyond recognition. Recognition, she said that in the imperial capital where she used to live, she had a servant named Tai. She once told her, remember these words well if you ever find a person dear to your heart. First, they need to truly get to know each other. So she asks, let her speak out. To start the grandest building in this city, Temple of Galactica, Mother Earth, right? He nodded, agreed. And she told that the headquarters of the Order of Galactica is a temple in the capital. It was there she grew up as a spiritual priestess of Viscatus. He asked, is that why she is always called the Black Princess? She agreed and said that black hair and eyes are extremely rare among people, and when the high priest came upon her near the statue of the goddess, he received a revelation. The goddess said that this child was granted her blessing, and they must raise her in purity and innocence thanks to her. Yet evil will disappear from this land and harmony will return to its place. Eureka said that the heart of the dungeon, which is located in the deepest part, has a boundary. As soon as it reaches it, it will explode, and this explosion will distort the surface with an incredibly concentrated magical essence, and that will be the end. Other continents have already met their demise. They have become only dead soil. To save this land, they need to remove the core before it reaches the limit. To help people in this mission, God endowed them with power and the protagonist. Magnus listened carefully and a thought spun in his head. Perhaps these are the gifts. She recalled her own. He remembered her past and said, because of her status as a priestess, people hoped that she would become a great adventurer. So she had to accept her fate. The essence of the greatest dungeon in the imperial capital, Endless Dungeon, had almost reached the limit. After such a revelation, she simply could not sit idly by. Not only would her hometown be destroyed, the entire land would perish. People live only once. The fact that you were chosen to save this world is not such a bad fate. He froze with surprise. And she said that if she reached the heart of the dungeon in this city, she would be able to level up, and that meant one more step ahead. Step forward to prevent the end. After meeting him and Maria, she had even more reasons to save this world. He looked at the face with surprise and thought that who could have known that the person who loved him was a hero from destined to save the world. Mari would be very surprised to hear about this. He smiled and promised to support her in everything, both as an ordinary person and as a Sherpa. She thanked him gladly. He smiled joyfully and said that it was reassuring, and a few days later, Sherpa Guild held a meeting, and MC decided that the shortcut found on the 48th floor along with the discovery of a new oasis was already something. It was breaking news that quickly spread among the city residents. One of the workers happily called the master and said that the Sherpa map had been updated. Gunji looked at him and replied that he had done a great job. From now on, only high-class travelers would submit requests to the expedition. It will definitely grow several times. They should remember this. Ro sat next to him and Decided that all those herbs and ore found on the uncovered floor could bring huge profits. He was confident. Confident that Yuika and her squad would be able to reach the lower floor and eliminate the core. Otherwise, the city would definitely destroy everything in the future. The confused Sherpa approached him and asked on what basis he had secured such a large contract with someone like Twilight Sword. He didn't even know they were in their city. And honestly, he himself would like to someday be a candidate for such a job. Jima came to them and stated that they have many special requirements for Sherpa, and it turned out that he is the only one who meets all the criteria. They called the master and said that at least he can inform them of the date they plan to throw the die. He was burning with desire to see them. He heard that their leader is incredibly beautiful, and there was also a legendary sage in the team. Gunji said that he knows in advance how they will behave, so he was asked not to talk about it. She said that their leader does not like noise, that's why they came incognito, however, their last cube. By the way, this dive caused quite a stir. Is he absolutely sure? Is it true that the heroes of the East will be able to cleanse there? In their dungeon, the protagonist agreed and said that, compared to all the teams he had to work with, he considers they believed they could handle it. She thoughtfully looked down and said she understands him. She turned back and the Sherpas said that Twilight Sword is still very cool. They have to drink to them. He looked at her and felt anxiety. Anxiety due to sudden silence, more precisely, a premonition of something. That's why. That's how he felt it at that moment, and later Morella came home. He knocked on the door and said hello. She opened it, looked at him simply and attentively. He approached and asked if he was late. She handed him something in a bag, then from the purse, took it out of the pocket and put it back in the purse. He apologized and replied that the work had been delayed. It was for her. He asked to distribute to everyone. She took it and he asked if those were the same candies, right? It wasn't that she didn't like them, she was just worried about her teeth's health. After that, they went into the house and she said they needed to hurry and take their seats, and also she apologized. They had already started eating. He thanked her and greeted Dossie, who was sitting at the table eating, then looked at him and asked if it was true that he was hired by the heroes of the East, all of them. Everyone sat at the table and started eating, and MC nodded and said he was very grateful for that. And at that very moment he realized this was the highest paid job of all he had ever had. With surprise, he said it was incredible and thought that this was a monthly dinner meant to bring them closer. Their blood ties, at least they all pretended it was so, but in reality, it was a monthly report on his finances. Dossie said that he probably had accumulated a pile of money and smiled. He had enough gold coins. Coins, I think a few dozen, no more. His children thanked for the food and ran to the room, and he started counting. Counting on his fingers, he and Morel figured out what exactly he was doing. Apparently, he needed to finish eating quickly. He sighed and said that he was just calculating in his head how well he was doing for his age. He smiled and said he could only work in peace because they took care of his sister. He laughed and added that no thanks were needed. There are no orphanages in the city. So as long as they are family, their duty is to take care of the children, right? Ro apologized and decided that every time he picks up Mari, he gave them compensation 2 silver coins, but they, as always, did not say a word about it. They don't take bread, they don't keep accounts. The bread is hard, the soup is thin, but he still cannot refuse under any circumstances, because they promised to take Mari if he dies in the dungeon, like in. As a condition, they will take everything he had, but honestly, he left half of his money with Gunji so that he would give it to his sister when she dies. When she grows up, although he is eccentric, he can be trusted. He called her and poked his finger at his own face. She said there was a crumb stuck here. She pulled it out, and after that they did finish eating. He picked her up in his arms, whispered that she had fallen asleep, so he would go home, and they said goodbye. Goodbye, and already outside he said that it seems when they look at him, they only see a big bag of money. She listened silently, and he apologized to her and said that all these problems fell on her while he was working. She was sleeping and called her brother with a gentle smile, and he smiled, and she even thought he was cute. Later, a huge crowd of different people gathered at the adventures. Guild Secretary of Adventures Sura said to her that everyone who wanted to get a report on the Twilight Sword's dive had to fill out forms and submit them. Only after that could they start. Many travelers approached her and began submitting applications to the Guild Secretary of Sherpas. Enya, who came to help with the work, brought a whole stack of forms, and Sura thanked her. For him, one of the adventures, with a joyful smile. He handed her his form, but accidentally knocked over the forms she had brought. Surek became furious to the point of madness. She slammed her palms on the table and loudly declared that they must follow orders and not deviate from the procedure. She directly forbade them to go forward. Everyone must stay in line and wait for their turn. Whoever fails this minor task will be permanently blacklisted. The frightened adventurers lined up and loudly agreed. She threw out, "Wonderful, let them if they want," and sat down in her place with an expression of dissatisfaction. He called her and said that they must immediately sort out these documents. She looked at him with delight and immediately agreed. The protagonist went inside and looked around in surprise at the crowd of people standing there. It seemed to him that he had come to greet Yueka. It seemed he could not even find her here. He approached the counter, called Anne, and said that she works tirelessly. She replied through tears in her eyes, "There is simply too much work here." Sora irritably called him and asked if he came to apply, but he was confused and said that just came to meet someone with the leader of Devil's Wheel Adventure Part. Hardy Sog approached him and said that he seemed to be managing. He handled it. He put his hand on his shoulder and asked, "So he was the guide for the heroes of the East, right?" He shouldn't get cocky just because important people hired him. After all, he was an ordinary porter. His team members came closer, agreed with this, and he, smiling, said that now he must tell them everything. What gifts their group has and how they fight. The secretaries looked at them with worried glances. The master of ceremonies called him and sharply asked if he had forgotten all the rules, saying he was stuck in the middle rows. He would never reveal such personal information, especially if it was someone who couldn't keep their mouth shut. Because of this, he got angry, grabbed him by the collar, and loudly pulled him. Right in front of the whole hall, he called him an idiot and demanded, "What did he just say?" Sura loudly called him and ordered him to stop. At that moment, Yueka came down from the second floor. He saw how the travelers gathered and wondered what happened to everyone. He couldn't get through the crowd and the people did not move. Standing in front of her, he declared that he was betting on Sag, so he would also place bets on Ro. She was immediately struck by the fact that they called him by name, and then the people around them began to incite them to fight. She became very angry and began to emit a strong aura This scared everyone around, and she said in a serious tone that everyone must step aside. She walked swiftly. She walked a little further and saw an unfamiliar adventurer who was holding him by the collar. Raised a fist, she approached closer and he became anxious because of how threateningly she was holding him. Sag tensed up and precisely because of this asked what she wanted. She said very seriously with a stone expression on her face that he must clean up his dirt. Hands off her darling. He was surprised after all she had just called him that. She loudly declared that he must do it immediately because of this very reason. He was terrified to the point of madness, fell to the ground and he began to crawl away from her. She looked at him with fear. A terribly serious expression froze on her face and the main character called her and said that she could calm down. He was fine. The adventurers heard her name and loudly, with surprise, asked, "Isn't that the leader of Team Twilight Sword?" Anna looked at her with admiration and said that it was much better. He asked, "By the way, did she just call him darling?" She agreed and said, "Their shame was that they really were a couple." The secretaries was very surprised by this. "You can approach them and say." Said that she apologized for the noise. They were confused by this and replied that she said that everything was fine. She smiled and added that she still had to deal with some things to do, so she apologized. Next, Nuku's business. He was serious and thought deeply. There should be no problems. Anne was very nervous when talking to her and then, blushing, shyly whispered, "That's good." He stepped closer, called her, and said that these two were his good acquaintances. Surabhad leaned toward her and added that she apologized for not introducing herself immediately. She named her name and said that she was the secretary of this guild. Standing next to her, terribly nervous, also introduced herself, explaining that she was sent from the Sherpa guild to help. Biku also introduced herself and said she was grateful to them for taking care of her pet. She also assured them that she greatly appreciated this care. She asked in surprise how long they had been seeing each other, then smiled happily and replied that it had only been a few days. But the confession was even earlier. First he confessed to her Anne and she looked happy. She said it was so romantic the travelers were stunned, and her smile blossomed even happier. And she said it happened twice. Her impression only grew, and she added that he is so stubborn. She was about to ask something else, but Sura called her and said she had received care. She was captivated. She turned to her and asked with a sparkle in her eyes, "Isn't it wonderful, Evina, to see how happy you are?" He laughed and said that it was exactly the same. Then he suggested meeting later and having lunch together, and she immediately agreed, adding that she would be glad to go. MC said that he regrets causing so much trouble, although there was so much work. Sura replied that it was okay, there was no need to apologize. He called and asked if it was time for them to leave. She agreed. They headed for the exit. He waved his hand to the secretaries and said that they would see each other again, and Han, with a very happy expression on his face, turned around and said that she invited them to have dinner together. Let them ask them everything properly. She, a little confused, agreed and said that now they should return to work. When they went outside, he called her by name. She addressed him as dear and asked what had happened. He asked if she was sure she should call him that. She also agreed and said that Tae called her husband that so. And she also called him that. He thought it over. She was talking about her maid. Right? Yuika smiled and said that she was just a little over 40. She was already not young and had raised many children, yet she and her husband still loved each other as if they were newlyweds again. She taught her everything about love. For example, lovers must always trust each other no matter what happens and fully dedicate themselves to the relationship if it is close, so that their love would have no end. That is what she believed. To be honest, she did not listen so attentively to all those endless talks about love, yet she still did not think she would ever have a beloved person. Now she regretted that she had not listened carefully enough. Looking slightly nervous, he thought, good thing they did not use the word darling when talking about each other. He did not think he could call her that in front of everyone. It seemed she grew up in a rather unusual environment, logical and calm, yes, but when it came to the basics, that is knowledge and experience, she had almost none. She called him darling again and said that now it was time for them to strengthen their bond. She reached out her hand to him and he pondered, does she want to hold hands? That is exactly how he imagined it, but everything turned out differently. Ro called her by name. He said her name and asked what she was doing. Ivica turned to him and replied that it is called clasping hands. He laughed and she asked if he was okay. He said everything was fine, it just seemed to him that it was very. Her style was the same. He believed that every couple is unique in its own way, and even despite the fact that despite her embarrassment and mistakes even in the most ordinary things, the main thing was that they felt happiness and satisfaction here. He asked if they walked step by step it would become easier. She agreed to try. Bari went out. He came out of the restaurant next to them and called him Pops, then said they would see each other later. He had the best meat. He gladly addressed her as young lady and said that of course it was so. She is supposed to come again. She noticed how they were walking together and asked why they were together. She noticed that they were holding hands, and she screamed loudly from confusion. Her thoughts crumpled in her head. She pondered. She was surprised why they held hands so strangely and walked in sync. She rushed to them, called the princess, asked her to wait, but at that moment the cat jumped onto her chest and looked at the meat she was holding. She held on. She apologized to the cat and said she was in a hurry, then turned around. She turned to them and did not notice where they disappeared to. This terribly unsettled her, and they continued on foot, and Ivka asked if this was the same clinic. The protagonist knocked on the door, agreed, and said that he just needed to ask the doctor something. It wouldn't take long. He went in, called Dr. Canope, introduced himself, and said he was coming in. He moved on, saw that he was sleeping near a pile of empty alcohol bottles, and said that he understood that he was sleeping. He tried to wake him up, and she got a little worried. He was gnawed by the thought of how many alcohol bottles were here, and he couldn't shake it off. He said it was in vain. He immediately passed out himself. Then he called her and asked. It was a bit awkward to ask about this, but can she use the dark race drop spell on him? She agreed to it and stated that it was not a problem for her. She used magic. He came to and asked in surprise if he didn't have a headache because the alcohol was way too good. MC asked if he had prepared the potion he requested. Kenobi denied it, took the bottle and gave it to him, saying, then at least ask him for a prescription. He replied that he would wait a second. He will write it right now. He handed him the antidote prescription and warned, if he manages to sell it, don't forget to bring him even more alcohol. He agreed and sincerely thanked him. They left the clinic and she asked what kind of antidote it was. He replied that it was an antidote for the poison given to them by the boss from the floor last time. He believed that this monster was now registered in the dungeon guide under the name Bomb Vine. He said he gave the doctor several thorns and he managed to save them. He has a gift for analysis. If there is a source of poison, making an antidote for it is not a problem. With a slightly dissatisfied expression, she said that she would never have thought he had such an incredible talent. He smiled and replied that he is a bit scary and also constantly angry. He incredibly inflates prices and even drinks right at work, but he is a master of magic. Everything he knew about pharmacology he learned from him. He can be trusted. After making a few copies of the antidote, he plans to sell it to the Adventurers Guild, so he was. While he was pondering all this, saving her, Ro asked if it bothered her. She replied with a slightly surprised expression that nodded Alan it impressed her. As befits her beloved, they can raise the stakes. Antidotes with them on their next dive. Wonderful, right? He asked if they would go home after buying groceries. Okay, she agreed. Then she noticed a shop called him over and suggested going inside. He glanced toward the shop. He stopped by the store and asked if she wanted to go to the bookstore. She agreed and said she wanted to buy something. Later they returned home and Mari greeted them, to who said, "Welcome back." They approached her and Ivka took out a photo album saying she had a gift for her. The gift was meant specifically for her. She took it, beaming with happiness, and thanked. Satisfied, smiling, she said that she likes it. They went into the house and he said he would go prepare dinner. "Can you read along with me?" He gladly agreed and replied that he could rely on her. They settled down to read as soon as he finished cooking. After a short pause, they went to eat. Marie, she, tiredly squinting, rubbed her eyes, called her sister, and suggested going to sleep together. He called her and said it was time to go back home. For a whole week he hugged her and said, darling, that he didn't want her to leave. He was confused, but he added that she couldn't stay here. Trust between adventurers and Sherpas is critically important, and if she again remains not on his side, then others will stop trusting him. She still did not lose hope to stay in their house and asked if she could at least stay here until she falls asleep. He apologized and explained that, however, she was already asleep. She led her to bed and wished her good night. They went outside and he offered to escort her home, but she said that it was not. It's not worth it, he can't leave Marie alone. He agreed and said that then they would see each other tomorrow. She turned to. She gave him a look somewhat dissatisfied and he immediately asked, "Is something wrong?" She said that the connections say, regardless of whether it is morning or night, when lovers part, they say goodbye to each other properly. He raised his eyes and thought, could it be that his words are not enough? But what is needed then? A thought flashed through the hero. He stepped closer. He asked shyly if she could close her eyes. She did it with a very embarrassed expression on her face, and he put his hands on her shoulders and thought that she was also looking at him. He had been silent for too long. He kissed her and wished her good night. A few days later. After a few days, they began their second descent into the dungeon and reached the 32nd floor. Bari pointed at him and said she had seen everything. They moved strangely, as if something was urging them on. The miracle was that they held hands right in the very center of the city. She would have believed it was a date. She resisted, called Nuka the Black Princess, and added that if she was in a relationship, it could cause problems. What would the temple master say when he finds out about this, Yuika from? With a confident smile he asked, "Let her finish," and then repeated again, "Love people are those for whom only one thing matters, whether the feelings are mutual, right?" He and his beloved had already been through this. So there was no doubt they were definitely in love. It shocked them and she loudly said that. Indeed, there were bad rumors about this guy, but she learned about them from the owner of the liquor store. They do remember their requirements for Sherpas, right? They need to have experience in something truly outstanding, and this guy is really a good guide, but the problem is in their second requirement, their Sherpa. Sherpa must be at least level 5. The guy himself is just an average traveler, level 7 about 4 years ago. However, they descended to the 14th floor by a shortcut known only to medium and high-rank Sherpas, but he deliberately led them to the 13th, the one designated for beginners. There they smashed every monster they could find, and he took all the experience and loot that dropped from that floor. Here's the thing, for beginner adventurers usually don't do that, but he did it again and again, so they nicknamed him Floor Eater. Yuika turned around and asked if he had any reason at all. Right? He agreed and said that that's exactly how it was. Yuika calmly replied that. Then they could do nothing. Nuku called her and stated that she should think about her position. She is a symbol of trust for Galactica. All adventurers want to be like her. If rumors spread that she is dating someone, it will only strengthen people's doubts. MC listened to him and thought, that's exactly how it will be. According to him, once someone pretended to be her lover, and because of that, a bunch of gossip articles accumulated. The uproar arose not only among her fans, but also among the church hierarchy, guilds, and young ladies from blue blood families. It even reached the point that members of Twilight Swords, the squad, forbade her to go out in public. She returned to him and indignantly told Darling that these articles were complete fabrications. He was the first man she had dated. Yuku jumped up, grabbed him by the head, and said that the problem was no longer about that. Now he asked, just in case, is there a likelihood that they would break up? Yuika firmly refused. And then he asked her to promise 3 things. First, she must not do anything in front of other people, not even in front of this Darling. Second, she is not allowed to go on dates with him or sleep with him without his permission. Third, when they are in the dungeon, they should behave as usual for a traveler and Sherpa relationship. She wanted to object, but he looked at her sternly and called her closer, saying he did not know if Tai had already told her about this. However, lovers do go on dates that is, so to speak, normal. They just need to do everything secretly. She said, slightly embarrassed that the city was full of people and the expensive house even had a sister. So where, she asked, are they supposed to flirt? He and Bari grabbed their heads and she loudly declared that they did not care. Mazakin laughed and said that young love is so beautiful, and just from those words his stomach ached. Nuku called him and asked him not to mock them. He replied that he had not a gram of humor in him. In the capital, apparently, he was a priest working for Black Princess, but now they both became travelers, right? Such work is dangerous, you can die at any moment, so why not let them do what they want? She angrily attacked the old man and loudly said that he should not say such things, until the wheel suddenly turned in another direction. To Eureka, he shouted and asked what they should do. She, with slightly dissatisfied facial expression, she replied that she understood everything and agreed to the terms, but would continue to call him darling as long as they were the only ones here, nothing changed. Bari really did not like it. Who called her and said that she needed to focus on diving. After that, they could. They continued exploring, and he thought, as last time in 2 days they reached the 43rd floor. Under her command now 7 skeletons, 9 orcs, and 5 imps capable of using magical spells. She stretched out her hand forward with a serious expression right at the monsters in front of her, and ordered her monsters to shoot ice arrows and the others too. They retreated and then reached the 46th floor, fought monsters again and encountered salamanders who had an innate gift for firearms. She used it. The gift of Phantom Needle managed to catch 6 salamanders and said, "Excellent, she will name them Saro." Sarah 16, Nuku called her and said that he felt another monster approaches nearby. They need to manage to dodge. A fluffy giant in fur. The fur covers his entire body. No physical attacks against him work. He called sorry and said that they need to test their abilities. They should reduce everything to a pile of ashes, attack the monster simultaneously, and she, with a satisfied face, said that they have to. They need to concentrate fire on his flesh. They suppressed the giant with their attacks. Ivka called him and asked, "What's the matter? Is that all he's capable of? He has no fighting spirit," and she burst into loud laughter. Udley and Mazikun called that guy and asked if he was okay. His lips trembled. So they are in love, right? The protagonist, with a barely noticeable smile, thought that it was unusual for a person to get so excited during a fight with monsters. She jumped from the cliff she was standing on and she said that Sarah would probably fit in well in the upcoming battles. Of course, it's a pity that Nico and Menorin. And this time she is not going with them. She ordered the monsters to line up and said that the list was not bad. They needed to reach the 48th floor as soon as they got there. Here he decided that this floor had not yet been surveyed, but one single mistake and everyone could be covered without a doubt. Sherpa can do nothing here. He can only focus on creating. Now they are at E4S24. Darksmith teleported behind them, laughed in, and said that he knows this. He found a boy with a girl with braids. MC felt something, turned around and she noticed it. He did and asked, "Is something wrong with you?" and kept responding, constantly looking back. She looked at him and asked, "Don't you have the feeling that someone is watching you?" He was watching them, objected, and said that she felt nothing. Whatever happens, they still have to stay alert. He approached 2 orcs and said that they would cover their backs. Nuku called his lover and declared, "Ahead 3 huge monsters." When ahead, she smiled, "She will handle them." They stepped into a wide open space, but did not notice any monsters nearby, and therefore she said that she saw nothing. She called him and asked if he was sure they were there. He agreed and wrote it down. And Rose added, "If so, these monsters might have the gift of illusion or camouflage." He put his backpack on the ground, crouched and began to listen. Somewhere above there was a muffled scratching or rustling, and it flashed through his mind, if you look closely. The strangest thing was that the moss glowed only in certain places. He said that the monsters hide underground, most likely these are monsters that easily pass through different types of rock. Eureka thought it over and said she knew several monsters that fit this description. They are now on lower levels, but each has its weak spots. First of all, you need to know exactly what you are dealing with. Nuku said that they needed bait. Fortunately, among the monsters nearby, there were small and agile salamanders. She nodded, called Seru 6, and ordered, "He must run across the entire hall." Salamander dashed forward, and she immediately warned that they would stay here. "Stay here and wait until the enemy appears." He was intently watching what was happening around. He noticed something moving underground and said that it was approaching something huge. Orm emerged from under the ground. And the main hero asked, "Is this OV?" Ovian, she said, and seriousness froze on her face. And these monsters are vulnerable to fire. They need to use Sarah's flamethrower, Nuku called her, and he said that the salamanders currently cannot move. Against 3 Ovians, they will become their first target. He raised his hand and said that he had an idea. Each of them can take a salamander with the help of Bari's sails and air magic. They will be able to move quickly and the salamanders will be able to use this spell without any problems, right? She asked. Then they will become legs for the salamander. Salamanders, right? She called out to Sarah and took him in her palm, Mazikin. With a look of dissatisfaction, he asked if he also had to participate in this, Bari with an indignant expression. He loudly declared that, of course, he had to stop using levitation. Ivka called Darling and said, "He needs to hide here." He agreed, and she ordered several monsters to guard. To detain him, and so that other monsters would become bait, they moved forward, and she loudly announced that the attack would begin as soon as the rest of the Ovians appeared. He watched all this from behind. He was sure even among the rarest Ovian monsters there are some of the strongest. He hoped that this strategy would work, and that no one would get hurt. The others were already fighting the monsters, and he decided, fire cannons are effective. Great, it's only a matter of time. He began to express an opinion but did not manage to finish it. A dark smith flashed behind. He called him the guy with the pigtails, greeted him, and asked why he had so many things. He, just like that one, made the delivery. "Is there anything else here?" He turned to him, called out with slight surprise, and thought that he had come at just the right time. Seeing that he was fine, he felt touched. After these words, with a joyful face, he said that he was quite a good person, and indeed it turned out that way. He looked at the monster guarding his path and asked, "Does he understand that his friends downstairs never answer?" He was so happy that he could finally talk to someone. During a conversation, you always need feedback, right? He asked, clarifying if he meant exactly feedback. He fell to the ground and said that he actually knows a lot about the surface. He knows Lady Pamela at the reception is unrealistically beautiful and has a gorgeous body. And also Sleepy's kebabs taste good with what is called ale. Right? He was surprised to hear this and immediately wondered, did she really retire 7 years ago? He decided to join the game and said he knew quite a lot, but thought that this information was a bit outdated. The blacksmith pulled out a dagger and, smiling, declared, "This is the dagger of memories. You see the memories of the one you strike with it. He has learned a lot from those travelers who perished in this dungeon. If the body is fresh, the memories are still clear. He followed them hoping they would all die. He wants to see their memories." MC quietly coughed, nodded thoughtfully, and asked if this dagger was made in a workshop. The other agreed, yes, it was made in a workshop on the 52nd floor. However, he himself is only a courier. Whoever is behind this, it drags along an entire operation. There is administration and even fundraising. And among all these people, he is the only one who understands how to best use such things. He called it cool, and thought that it means only 4 dark smiths. The dungeon should be on the 52nd and 53rd floors. If there is a workshop on the 52nd, then the lowest floor is almost certainly the 53rd. Right now on the lower floor, besides the boss, there are no other monsters. They are all on the 48th floor. It's easier to sort out the past when you know exactly how many floors there are in total. This monster is such a becomes too talkative, wants to track how much information it can extract from this. Meanwhile, people are trying to completely clear the dungeon, while monsters cover them, but one day they will have to fight the darksmiths too. Don't lock yourself up too much and don't lose vigilance. The blacksmith crawled even closer, heard sharp thuds, and asked what was happening there. Darling Yuika called and said he can come out. Ro went to them. The monster crouched behind his back and he cheerfully assured that everything was fine. Bari saw him and grabbed him. He snatched her weapon and loudly announced that this was the very monster. Nuku approached and ordered her to wait, otherwise she could have injured him too. She must not forget he can teleport, otherwise they will end up just like last time. Yuika tightly gripped the sword called Road and asked what it means. He calmly replied that he came across it simply by hiding. It seems his workshop was on the 52nd floor. He seemed to be quite familiar with the lower levels, at least where exactly the oases were. Kovalov said this in a confused tone. He said that of course he knows, he has been in every corner of this dungeon. Then he turned to Kovalov and asked with a smile, or by any chance, if he asks politely, he will show the path with the fewest monsters. He called himself the guy with braids and wondered if he would really ask. The other happily replied that of course he will lead them on the way to the oasis. He thought and said that only the leader could later give him permission for this. After all, monsters are all around. Ipanuika circled around Kovalov, pointed a weapon at him, and declared that their road to the oasis would be faster if they could. She could use him as bait for the monsters, and yet Bri said, he will run away the moment and even before she manages to use the phantom needle on him. How to stop his teleportation? She asked. Nuku replied that no demonic energy flows from him, so no enemy sensors trigger on him. The protagonist approached closer, called him, and asked if he could already feel his energy. He agreed and immediately asked what exactly the protagonist had done. He showed them a thing and explained that he hides his demonic energy thanks to this presence isolation pendant. As soon as he said this, they would no longer believe it. Trust him until you feel the energy, and as soon as it appears in their sensations, he will immediately give it to the protagonist. He also gave him the boots he used for teleportation. Mazakin extended his hand and asked to give him these items for evaluation. He accepted them and said that yes, the boots really have displacement cast, and the pendant does not arouse suspicion. Yoyuka asked in surprise. He told all this even when no one was controlling him. He agreed and replied that his goal was simply to talk to someone. If they understand him, he will be able to tell them more. She asked if they could use this even without the phantom needle. He said the likelihood of that was high. But ultimately it was up to them to decide what to do. He agreed to anything. No decision. She thought it over and said they would do as Darling said. He said Bari was surprised and asked the princess if she was completely sure. She agreed and said they would be allowed to move freely. However, if any problems arise, she will use Darling. MC came to the blacksmith and said they had been given permission. This pleased him greatly. It happened, but she approached him, called him a monster, and said he was celebrating too early. They have conditions under which he can continue. Talk to the boy with braids. At first he will follow her orders like a leader. He agreed. To this he replied, and she ordered him to call her ma'am. He agreed. Then she said there was also a second thing. He must not attack all party members the same way as the monsters she controls. Thirdly, no lies. If he breaks even one condition, he will not be able to. He will never speak again with the boy with braids. Understood. He straightened up, agreed to these terms, and she said, all right, from now on his name is Skull Mask. Ro stood nearby and smiling said that now they need to head to the oasis. He agreed, pointed in the right direction, and confirmed that that was exactly where they should go. Mazakin looked at this and said, he is just leading the monster by the nose like this. This guy is incredible. Nuku agreed and added that if he ever became their enemy, he would probably be the most terrifying of all they had ever met. And he decided, traveling with a smart monster, this had never happened before, and not only with Twilight Sword. In the entire history of travelers, this was a unique case, a skull mask and the monster's desire to talk. Such a monster should not exist, so they had to be cautious. Eureka said they must set off immediately. He has to lead them to the nearest oasis. Politely agreed and showed them the direction. Ari looked away and asked, what about that huge passage he said was a hole in a path? But it is not a path. Avioni left their tracks everywhere. He tried to pass through once but eventually got stuck in circles again. When he finally got out, he found himself where he started. If a person gets lost in this place, most likely they will simply die. The real path is this crevice. Mazuakin snorted with laughter and said to the newcomers, it will seem fatal, but if you don't know about it, it's easy to pass by. The protagonist marked it on the map and he climbed into the crevice and told them to be careful. It was quite tight there. Eureka said she would send Sarah ahead to light up. That way, she called Darling and asked what he thought. Would they be able to pass here? He agreed and replied that they could. He walked along the crack and thought that this was a very unusual structure for a dungeon. If the passage is so narrow, then even monsters would not take this path. Nuku called Lady Black Princess and she said that the orcs were stuck. She called them and ordered them to enter slowly one by one. Skullma Mask named the boy with braids and said that the exit was here. She called him. He got out of the gorge and told the others that he already saw the exit. Then he asked if there was an oasis nearby. He stood next to him and they said it was a little ahead. He was struck by what he saw there and then joy spread inside. Happy Berry nodded joyfully but bumped into his backpack. She looked a little displeased and declared that the luggage was blocking the passage. Because of what she saw, she loudly called the princess and said that it was only a nightmare. She needed to go out and look. Ivica climbed out of the crevice. Travis called Darling and asked what had happened here. He called her by name and ordered her to look ahead. Ahead was a cliff. She was outraged and asked what that meant. She wanted to say something else, but the worried blacksmith interrupted her and assured her that he was not lying. The road continued further in that direction. He noticed a path next to the cliff and asked if that was what he was talking about. They nodded at him and he said he had been there many times. Bari asked how he crossed that chasm. He replied, "It's simple thanks to boots with movement, so doing it is incredibly easy." MC lifted his boots and declared that now he had them. Now he was in terrible anger and promised to give him sandals. Yuika asked if her demons could carry them one by one. Flying demons picked up one orc and Nuku said that's how it should work. The skull mask beamed with joy and asked if she was an angel incarnate. He smiled and replied that she was exaggerating, by the way. How did he know this word angel? She called two monsters. Orders told them to carry the orcs and assured the rest would follow them. He glanced aside and thought, you can't get there if you don't know how to fly. He had never seen anything like it, not even on maps. What should we call it, this path? An air bridge, maybe it should be marked with a symbol. He looked down. It said that down there was a whole swarm of blood cockroaches. Bari. He was carried by monsters chasing after them, and he got scared and said they should try not to look there. There she looked very frightened and said she needed to be moved quickly. Yuyuko was taken to them. There she called her and asked how she was feeling. They had not yet transported everyone, but they needed to move on. She called her and they said 5 flying monsters, and after they moved the monsters one by one, let them follow them. They went further and saw many. He hinted at many different passages and explained they needed the second cave on the right. Ro asked if these were really all different paths. Having received a positive answer, he began to note it on the map and thought, with so many passages, it will be very difficult for the next group of travelers even with a map. Gull Mask moved on and said they needed to go there. There he thanked him and immediately added that he had helped them a lot. He laughed and caught himself thinking, it looks like he is a special person. He thanked for the compliment and with a joyful expression asked if he could keep these sandals. He allowed it with a smile and said let it be a sign of gratitude and proof of truth. As confirmation of their friendship, Yuika coughed to attract attention and said they needed to go down and rest. He suggested making tea. She agreed and later thanked him. And he brewed tea, brought it to the others and said. He said he was switching to fruit food also as a snack. It was a bit sour but still very tasty. He approached the rest of the team and treated them as well. And they thanked him for it. He turned to Skull Mask and said that he already had it for him too. He was very happy and said that he really was a very good person. He took it in his hands, looked at the dried fruits with delight and asked, does this mean that people eat them? He was terribly surprised. The taste was incredible and the main character just laughed and said that he needed to eat slower so that no one chokes. Bari noticed how the princess frowned displeased and asked what happened. Yueka answered with a serious face that they needed to act according to the plan. He called the whole team and asked if they could come here. He agreed. And she called Skull Mask and ordered him to stay there and sit quietly. When everyone gathered around her, she addressed Darling. It could be safely assumed that the lowest floor of the dungeon is the 53rd, right? He agreed and said that most likely yes. She moved closer and informed, now they are on the 48th floor and the next target is the 50th. Basement. As soon as they found the bypass, they could get back to the surface again. Bari looked at them enviously and asked how much longer they would have to drag this monster. She turned to him and replied that they were incredibly lucky. They did not get lost and managed to take the bypass. Bari would prefer if she led them all the way to the end of the route. Nuku covered his face with his hand, grimacing with displeasure, and Mazukin was chewing fruit and said that here, it seems, a bittersweet love triangle is emerging. He called Nuku and politely asked not to say too much. Yueka called Darling and asked if he could ask him about the next step. MC agreed and said that he thought that he finally understood how to deal with him. By the way, he wanted to ask him about monsters. He was sure that they would come across ones that were not yet in the monster guide, and there was still a chance that they would encounter a floor boss. Nuku asked in surprise if he wanted to talk with him also about bosses. He smiled and replied that he understood it could be dangerous. He would try to ask carefully so that he would not suspect anything. She turned to him and asked, looking anxiously. Of course, it was wonderful, but was he not getting too close? Even if acting with good intentions, he behaved too friendly with him. He must remember this. He was a monster and an enemy for some reason. Her heart tightened from that closeness. He looked a little confused and said that he understood her. Ari was very upset because for the first time she realized the princess was jealous and called her. Mazukin was sipping tea and declared that this could be considered advice from the leader. Isn't it incredibly laughable? Eureka stood up and said that they had rested well, they could continue. She called Skalmaskin and he replied that they needed to go down even further. Let him show them the shortest path. He agreed and asked if there would be even tastier food. Ro looked at him through a smile and said that maybe it would be so. He agreed and said, then let's make haste. He led them to the slope, laughed and he said that being together with adventurers is pure pleasure. He walked alongside, looked around and asked if he was not strolling with his comrades. The dark smiths he did not know enough, so he would just make a sketch. The blacksmith contradicted what he said earlier and said that he invited. But no one responded. He looked at him and asked, by the way, he speaks their language perfectly, but he has no one to talk to. Is that true? The local monsters also do not respond to him. He agreed and said that they do not respond, but one of them sang and even cast a spell. So they must understand the language. That is why he constantly tries to talk to them. He cannot get the thought of singing out of his mind. Obviously, they must be one level higher. Level monsters because they can put meaning into words. Maybe they are floor bosses after all. He looked around, you noticed this, and nodded to him. He said that he cares about his friends. What class are they? Skullmask stepped forward and answered that he does not know at all. All the monster names he remembered came to him from other people's memories, people who died in the dungeon. He stepped into something liquid and Nuku was called by Lady Black Princess. She said that a monster appeared behind them. She asked for only one monster. For the lower floors, this is an extremely rare case. The protagonist heard the rumble of a rolling boulder and immediately understood. Only the monster that came alone appears on the floor. He sharply turned to them and loudly shouted, this is a killing ball. If it touches them, they will be destroyed. Note, the killing ball rolls, fills the entire dungeon corridor and destroys everything in its path. They covered everything that happened on the way. Rolling forward at full speed, Skullmask quickly asked, though the thing he stepped on earlier was the crushed monster they had just been talking about. He noticed that the passage branched off and in a serious tone told everyone, we need to go right. The blacksmith was shocked and loudly declared that this passage was wider. The ball would fit there without any problem. He said decisively and confidently that everything would be fine. They had to quickly run into this passage and they did. The ball rolled behind and the wheel of the process was already turning. Behind them it turned left. Bari noticed this and asked, but why did it turn there? He said that there were reports of people dying, but he recalled. One of the oldest guides said that the group managed to survive, they just chose the wider passage. Skullmask called out to him with admiration and blurted out that he knew so much. Even he, the monster, did not suspect this, but that was expected from his friend. Ivica laughed, shining with a satisfied smile, and teased, isn't he incredible? After all, he is F. She is her dear. Bari was stunned by what happened and wondered if she was competing with Ammon. Monster, a huge monster, crawled beside them, a sign that the carnival on the unexplored floor had silently already started. F. She went after them. Later she called him and said that the enemy was approaching. They both had to hide somewhere. He agreed. They moved to where there was more. Mazakin and MC asked if he had ever seen them fight, but received a denial in response. He said it was better for him to close his eyes for a monster like him. Could have been very shocking. The slime man crawled towards them. Her special ability is the physical endurance of this species. Nuku looked at that giant monster and said he felt the presence of 7. She was standing nearby. He added, nearby, this means one thing, they have merged into one. 7 called 5 of the Sarai and ordered them to climb the hill. The slime mass strikes immediately with flames from all sides. Slime monsters hold the fire only until it crumbles to dust. He sharply turned and loudly warned that 3 more monsters were sneaking from the opposite side. 7 called all the orcs and ordered them to cover from the rear. 3 minotaurs emerged from the darkness. She laughed and said that was wonderful. They must. It was necessary to strike what stood ahead. She cut through the group of skeletons to attack the monsters from the flank, called Bari, and said she should use magic to immobilize the slime man. He called 2 flying monsters and ordered them to obey their team. 2 more monsters, she gave the order to obey the teams of Nuku and said that he must provide support to the orcs and skeletons. He agreed, and with a confident smile she drew a sword and said that they needed to put an end to the carnival. At that moment the frightened Skull Mask turned to the boy with he had pigtails and asked if he could be pushed in the shoulder, when he could open his. He opened his eyes, something pushed him in the shoulder and he asked if this was really the end. Ready, and he was able to open his eyes. He got even more scared when he saw that it was the head of an orc and loudly said that it was exactly this that hit him. He fainted. Mazakun confirmed this and Rose said that it was Ev. Even better for him like this. He took a notebook and began to think about how to describe how the battle goes. He wrote down, thanks to the fire of the salamander, the slugs were cut, and Bari, with the help of an imp, immobilized one of them. All 7 were caught by the phantom needle. The minotaurs still held formation, but the slow slug Slime was suddenly full of energy, Yuika shouted from the Then Puyo counted from 1 to 7 and told them to hold on. She asked to hold the Minotaur its tentacles. The slimes immediately obeyed her. She dived inside and grabbed the Minotaur. She rushed straight to them. She used the skill Phantom Needle, and then he said that all monsters should line up. She used the heal monster spell on them, and finally she had 3 salamanders, 7 slimes, and 3 minotaurs. And 1 imp under her control. She looked at them with. He looked intently and said that the attack power is weak. He suggested they move on and called Darla. And asked what is wrong with Skull Mask. He held it with one hand and said that he is fainting, asked for a moment to recover, and offered them a snack. Hearing this, he immediately came to his senses. He stood up and said happily that he also wanted to eat. The protagonist smiled and replied that first they would reach the oasis on the 49th. 9th floor. Okay, Nuku looked at this with a confused expression and thought that it looked like he was holding him on a short leash. Later they set up camp near the oasis, and while resting and treating wounds they managed to pull out the garrison and 1 skeleton knight with the gift of explosion. After that they finally reached the finish point of the descent, the 50th floor. He went ahead and thought that the level of the Twilight Sword Squad was on the 12th. And the recommended level for this place is 16. Although they conserve energy, fatigue quickly builds up. It seems they should prepare something. On the next run, something light, and they also need to prepare health and mind. Potions, the Skull Mask exclaimed with slight surprise. It touched him and he asked, what happened? Did they get lost? He dismissed this and said that he seemed to remember this place when he came to visit his friend. He often teleported to the nearest place. He just didn't notice at first because he came here very abruptly. This caught Iwik's attention, so MC asked, does this mean his friend is somewhere nearby? He replied, that happens most often but not always. He is quite gloomy but huge, so he won't be hard to find, and their faces are also somewhat similar. He was a little confused and decided that this was not at all like what he already knew about his own face. Face remained hidden by the mask. They entered a large empty cave. And Skull Mask said that he was ultimately not in the right place. Usually he talks to him right here. He looked around and thought that it was terribly dark here. It is dark here. They heard the clatter of horse hooves and it scared him so much that he shouted loudly, so they will be here soon. What should they do? His own reaction surprised him, so he asked. They are friends, aren't they? He loudly denied this and declared that they were old enemies. Once they tore out and ate his hair, and this hair is extremely precious to him. He got it from dead peeplethos he found in the dungeon. And he attached it here on hair at a time. It took a very long time. He does not want to go through that again. He started to run away, said goodbye to theme, and Ro asked to wait, saying he forgot. He lost his boot, so everything is decided. He said he had fun, so he might leave it. And after all, it is cursed. They will meet again someday, but next time they might meet as enemies. After all, monsters exist to protect the dungeon. Yuika noticed that Skull Mask ran away and asked Nuku how many enemies were coming here. He answered, there are 13. We'll see. Coming from the front, they seem to be moving together. She called Bui and said that they need to form a defensive formation, shoulder to shoulder. Slimes closed into a wall, and she called Minoran so that they let them prepare their spears and let the geese cover their backs. Isukin Sarah must protect her beloved child. In Mazukin, the thunder of hooves rolled forward louder and louder. And they heard the loud scream of those monsters. Protagonist saw those monsters and said that they were by. If they hit you with their horns, the wound will rot until they die. She died with a firm expression on her face. She rushed to Bio and sharply called him. He ordered her to block their way. The monsters crashed into the slugs, and they began to devour them. Ivico calmly approached them. Approaching closer, he said that in defense, they are much more useful than she expected. He so easily caught a whole pack of monsters and used Phantom Muti. He aimed with needle skill at them and said his name was Yagi-1. After this, she ordered them to line up, and Barry called her and asked if they looked more like horses. Nuku called the mistress and said that there were 6 more enemies ahead. They looked back and MC said that these were skeletons, but they didn't even have armor or weapons. She smiled and said that it was timely they could try Yagi just on them. She ordered them to attack the skeletons and they handled it without any difficulty. He called her again and warned about 6 more monsters. He was a bit surprised that he saw it and thought these were more skeletons. There were many of them. Without any weapons, is this their territory or something? A few more times 6 skeletons appeared to them, and she defeated them with the help of monsters. Yuiko was a bit confused and asked, what is happening? It's like they were just walking to their death. Death in the air above Ya, a magic circle appeared. Yagi, which immediately attracted their attention. This magic circle tore apart the dark energy. Circling, she loudly commanded Booyah. Leo lowered into a defensive stance. Dances, they all heard a very loud noise. A rumble that made them cover their ears. Ru was surprised by the sound. She called out loudly. He reached Yagi, ordered them to flee from there, and as soon as the dark magic entered, the energy disappeared and she noticed it with surprise. Ari noticed that Yagi had disappeared, and then something else. Something from above, Ru pointed and asked. And he asked to look at it. Everyone felt how it pressed on them, squeezed so much that it took their breath away. They were squeezing their hearts, and that took away all common sense. As if their heads refused to think, a huge skeleton appeared. It emerged next to them and, uttering the spell of the gates to the underworld, secured its arrival. He looked at it and decided what he felt. There is only fear. It was King of the Dead, born in despair. Isn't that a top rank? Undead monster of top rank. Mazakin was the F. He was the first to overcome his fear and immediately cast a spell. Moonblade spell. The boss of the 50th floor used it. He uttered a counterspell against the bell and deflected its attack. He glanced at it. He said this with a serious expression and assured, this means he can reflect his own thoughts. Reflect magical attacks. His spell whirled from its place and flew into. A strike. Such a blow became the signal. The battle begins. They quickly came to their senses, grabbed their weapons, and took up prepared positions to continue acting. Shifted into combat stances. With a loud shout, Ivica declared that Minoran 1 and Minoran 2 must. We need to deal with the skeletons and keep the last one in reserve. Booyah 1 must break through the darkness in 7 all the way to the king. The protagonist took something out of the backpack and shouted Mazikun. He said that these mana potions must be used, took them and attached them to his. He took out the belt, barely smiled, and said that it seems he will have to participate. Eventually he became curious. He called Black Princess and said he would try to attack them with his magic. And asked to borrow support from the Minotaurs. She agreed and said that G from 1. 4 must remain in reserve and wait there. Darling must stay behind. He agreed and asked everyone to be careful. She agreed, rushed forward. He went ahead and named Nuka, Barry, and Nisuk in her honor. They rushed past the Minotaurs who fought skeletons, rushed forward to the boss and he opened the gate. Read again the gate to the underworld spell and summon the skeletons again. She noticed it and called Nisagate. So he ordered her to deal with them. Their joint efforts and they defeated the group. Pack of skeletons and they continued breaking through the obstacles. King of the Dead clapped his hands and cast the spell Funeral Prayer. He released a powerful sound wave and they were immediately engulfed by it. Covered their ears with their hands and cannot move. Bows began using drains. Bell Mazakin was very worried about this. Loudly said that this is very bad. It was an attack on the very soul. If it had hit them, the soul would have died itself. Must dodge. Everyone barely averted this attack. Attack and the dark energy released by the monster disappears. Disappeared. Yuhiko loudly called Barry. Said that the enemy was already behind her. Struck her and she immediately rushed into an attack with a dagger but the skeleton stopped the blow with its teeth and grabbed her by the head. She immediately called Sarah and ordered her to help her. The salamander ran up to her and he jumped to her and incinerated the monster with flame. He thanked the princess for this and said that she would use the psalm. Salamander as before with Ovian's she agreed and ordered them to obey her commands. She turned around and loudly announced they need to destroy one of the king's hands. Their only task is to focus precisely on this attack. Everyone immediately agreed and MS glanced and decided that due to the funeral prayer and withering, everything would fail. The combination of 2 attacks is too dangerous. If only they were not hitting from afar. They could fall under an attack that wiped out all Bichorns. Even if they managed to get close to him, he defends himself with numerous skeletons he summons. If only they could find some gap in him, in his defense. Nuku with a serious face rushed into attack with his weapons bearer and used the throw skill. The King of the Dead used the Cotter Bell spell. He noticed this and with a surprised face thought that not only magic can be reflected this way. Logic in the head and also physical attacks. Yuyuka loudly said that maybe he cannot block everything in a row. At the same time, they must attack continuously. Agreed. He prepared to use a shooting technique and Bari flew behind the boss. Loudly ordered the salamander to immediately prepare to use the fire weapons. The order was just given and the plan began to come together into a single strike. They rushed into the attack from different sides simultaneously. He had no time left and the boss did not let him use the spell. The boss screamed fiercely in pain. In pain, she screamed and called Nisagate, ordering him to use it. Squeeze the explosion in his hand right now. The boss called him his own and ordered obedience. Obey him. He fell to his knees unable to move and she shouted to him from. He looked confused and asked what was wrong with him. You need to get up and attack the king. He threw his sword. He stuck the sword into the ground and grabbed her by the throat, and she did the same. She did not wait, everyone was even anxious. It disturbed her, so she called out to him and asked. He asked to be released and asked. He was asked why he no longer obeyed. It worried him, and he wondered if the king could. He could really command even the skeleton knights. She called Bio 7 and gave the order. He needed to grab him. The slime filth quickly crawled to him. He was grabbed and he let her go. He only exhaled when what had to happen happened and said that they lost part of their combat power, but unfortunately, it was inevitable. She summoned Buyo from the 1st to the 6th and said that they must continue. Inui advances through the darkness, immobilizing the king with his tentacles. He cast the gate spell to enter the underworld. She muttered in a dissatisfied tone, adding that he called them even more. There were countless skeletons, no end in sight. The king of the dead is about to cast a spell. Drain, but Bari jumped forward to pounce on him and said to the salamander, "Attack with magic," but the boss himself attacks with magic. He struck her with his tail and threw her to the ground with incredible force. He gnawed at them from the inside, and she finally called. He summoned monsters and ordered them to take care of the skeletons. He continued to call skeletons, and Madzaken created. He unfolded a magic circle right under this monster and cast a high explosive cannon spell. He released an extraordinarily powerful burst of energy. When the dust settled, he threw out the phrase with surprise. Surprise he managed to avoid. He is indeed quite agile for his size, isn't he? In any case, it seems he really did. He did not come out of there unscathed. Limus and King's spine were slightly broken, so he cast a funeral prayer spell. He became worried and loudly warned the others about another one. Another wave was approaching. The protagonist watched from the side and realized that the fight was dragging on. Then he came up with an idea. The usual tactics would not work here. Riko loudly said that they needed to get rid of him. First, with hand movements, she attacked the skeletons approaching them. She shouted science, and he understood her and promised that he would not allow it. He managed to cast only one spell. Bari jumped out for him and dived into the shadow. Behind his back, they loudly said again that he was drawn. He ordered to draw magical circles, and only then. He passed it to the salamander for Matt to use magic, and he did so. He struck with a spell, but the limousine still arrived. King was still using the spell Swamp of Darkness. A magical circle flared up under her feet. There were skeletons, and she noticed it and said they needed to run away from the magical circle. They all scattered, but one of them didn't make it. And instantly he was pulled under the spell. MC notices this. He felt it and decided. He was dragged into the mud. He calmly observed all this and thought it was wonderful. All three succeeded. The boss used a spell through the downpour and the she. He loudly shouted at G4 and gave the order. Tell him to use the blizzard spell to stop him. To him, the skeleton did so, and he succeeded, and even the bear. Ari from a distance held the salamander in her hands with which she performed magic. The king of the dead dodged this attack, and Yuka saw it and pondered. Was he beginning to predict their attacks? He called towards G4 and ordered to continue acting. He ordered him to use that spell again. He also called her and ordered to use the spell Fire Cannon. The monster dodged the attack again. She smiled and said that it was good. It was wonderful. Everything happened just as she planned. The end. Someone grabbed the sharp edge of the boss's mantle, and it immediately shrank like a rag. Slime crawled nearby. It confused her. She was surprised by what happened and said she understood everything, and he was very. She forced him to come closer very slowly. He loudly called Mazakin. He understood everything. Use the spell Moonblade. Tell the monster, what are you doing? Use the counterbill complex to reflect the spell. But he used the duplicate skill and launched it. Another spell. This is a gift that allows. This allows you to copy any spell as soon as it is used. He used it, but it cost twice as much mana. His strike hit, and he managed to cut off 2 monsters. They were glad about what happened. He drank a mana potion, addressed him only 2. Took only 2 hands, right? No problem. Ro was watching from cover. He covered it and immediately thought that using counterbell twice in a short time would not work. He understood this and immediately took advantage. Now his advantage was at dusk. On the side was a light sword, and the slime man had the gift of physical resistance, so his grip was almost impossible to weaken. Veka loudly ordered Menoran 3 to move forward and said to continue the offensive. He watched from afar and thought that this was not a direct attack. Loudly called G1 and 3 and ordered them to protect her. She and Nuku hid behind the monsters and survived the attack. Attack only when you hit. With such a serious face, she ordered him to take the sledgehammer and said they just have to use it as a shield. Good thing Minoran 3 was not hurt. Now he has to destroy the right hands of this creature. Minotaur rushed at him and he clapped his hands. He tied his hands and cast the burial prayer spell. Magical energy hit the monster, tearing the moment with the silence of the strike. She left a few wounds on his body, which immediately began to darken. He rushed closer and swung the axe. The barefoot applied the drain spell and hit himself in the head. Ivka shouted loudly and ordered him to attack his right hand. The eyes are flashing. The whole body tensed the muscles for F. For the final attack, the Minotaur cut off his own hand. It seems like the hand, but it grabbed it by the head. He tore it off completely. Bari was frozen with surprise. He said that the Minotaur is dead. He said, Ivka calmly agreed and replied that it is a great loss, but they had to take another hand. The protagonist watched this with a serious face, and she decided that her monsters are fearless no matter how wildly the enemies rage in attacks. They could not disobey and retreat, so they just kept attacking. The King of the Dead used the gate. The oath gate to the underworld worked, and the creature began to regrow its hand. It screamed loudly and called. He called G4 and ordered him to freeze that hand. He obeyed without question. His cliff behind his back so he could not escape. Nuku saw this as the perfect moment to attack, and used a throwing skill to strike exactly at his hand. One of those hands was the edge. The crack, Bari drew his daggers and rushed at this monster. The monster seemed to sense the threat, promised to tear this thing apart. He used the edge gift. It allows cutting everything the blade touches. He touched and cut off the fourth hand and the mutilated mother. The monster cast the spell Swamp of Darkness. He drew a magic circle under Yuika, but she suddenly jumped back. Ludovico sharply ordered Gi4 to run away. Gi4 ran away from there, but he couldn't. He was engulfed by black magical energy. Nike, glancing at the monster, loudly called the mistress. And he said, Slizan underwater drain. MC, did you notice that? He thought that almost all the monsters had already fallen. Yuika used the jump skill and dashed upward at a wildly high speed. This is a gift that temporarily enhances strength and activates precisely in this battle. The fight is decided by a single fraction of a second. Will his sword strike in time? Attack first to the king's hand, however at that moment on. In the last second, a smile flashed across her face. He thrust the sword into the eye socket of the King of the Dead. Before he could use magic, the phantom needle had already struck sharply, without warning. The gift needle stopped him in his tracks. She drew the sword and said that from now on his name was Mrs. Litz. She landed on the ground and declared that the ruler of the Shadow Kingdom must obey her. Nuku said that this is the boss from the 50th floor, and now she finally got him in the photo. Everything looks. It looked terrible. Yuika agreed and said that for him they had lost a total of 26 monsters. Only Niske, Buyo, and Sarah remained, and she decided to increase their numbers. First they need to rest. She will set them on guard. And Darling also has to prepare the potion. He agreed. Lower your gaze and outside. She asked while the floor is moving. Everyone stared in surprise, and she loudly added, so are they enemies again? And Bari asked with surprise, why is the floor shaking so much? Rose replied that it seemed like the floor was changing. An anomaly that happens once every few years. The floor began to collapse right under their feet. And the worried Eureka loudly declared that this would separate them. They must stay as close to each other as possible. He and Bari began to fall down. She anxiously called the princess. He was already about to call her and she noticed it. She shouted. He shouted at them so loudly, he was already about to use the gift and promised that save them, but the ground between them rose by 7 steps. Separate them, and they noticed that the passage was already narrowing, and she was very worried about what would happen next. He did not remain silent about this and called too. At the same time she fainted, and immediately thought that she was seeing the same dream again. In difficult times, she always reaches out in her thoughts to her former team, to the one that was. She was destroyed, and the one who saved her in that difficult moment is named Yuika. If they leave the labyrinths as they are, then all the light will be infected by magic and will fall, so to save it they will have to clear all the dungeons. When she spoke about this absurd plan, her eyes flashed brighter than anyone else's. In this world she wanted her gaze to shine just as dazzlingly. She wanted to be close, stay with her longer than anyone else, and help her more than anyone else. The princess was the only and first person who gave her hope. That was her light. She regained consciousness. The protagonist called her and said. She finally opened her eyes, but immediately covered them with her palm. He jerked his hands and loudly ordered that the lamp be turned off right now. She sat up sharply and asked if he wanted to burn her or something like that. He said he had looked around a bit here. It looks like this passage formed as a result of a collapse, but nothing extra twists. It stretches straight without branches or arenas. There are no monsters nearby yet. She tied her hair. And he said with a serious expression that they need to find the princess, must be somewhere nearby. He looked at her and said that it is dangerous to go somewhere without thinking. She was about to object, but he said that she should think about how they were separated. Eureka and the rest were most likely together. A skeleton knight was standing nearby, but he did nothing. This was proof that her phantom needle still worked. Bari T. Harry thought and said that it seemed he was right. He said this with a barely noticeable smile. As long as Nuku was with them, they could move much more safely than they ever could without him. Good, so he suggested to believe in them and wait here. He handed her a potion for recovery and asked her to drink it. After that, he went straight to the monster standing nearby. I said that the skeleton knight had lost his left hand and shield, but was still standing. He drew his sword. She began to drink the potion and threw at him, carefree. She trembled as soon as she heard everything. She heard a loud sound and immediately started coughing. She turned that way, already wanting to ask something. But he held the sword in his hands and said what he thought. This sword might come in handy. Power. Strength requirement 35 points to hold it with both hands. He hopes it is not cursed. He stabbed the sword into the rock and it loudly asked, "What does it do?" said MC. He heard rumors that after collapses, the walls and floor are soft, too soft. For now they cannot use this. Everything crumbles too easily. However, when it hardens, this span will come in handy if something happens. He invited her to sit and explained that they need to discuss tactics. Even if only temporarily, they are on the same side. If monsters appear, it means they will have to fight, so it's time to talk about stats and gifts. He is a level 7 traveler and a heavy warrior. His gift is stamina regeneration. 4th class. She was surprised and said that despite everything, the highest class is 3rd. Relying on travelers and the Galactica Guild Church, he agreed and said that he asked to keep it secret because he had never told anyone about it before. She knows about the choice between a gift and stats during leveling up except for level 1 when he received stamina regeneration. He always picked strength increases, so now he has 31 strength points. Judging by this alone, he can compete with high-level adventurers. She slapped herself in the face with disgust and thought he was a real idiot. She needs to pull herself together. She is level 11, he called. He called her and said that she also has to tell him about her abilities. All this is for survival and reunion with Yuika. Suddenly, with a gloomy expression and hesitation, he said that nothing can be done anymore. About this, her story, he said, if they encounter 5 monsters together, they will not win, but he had a plan on how to pull it off. He asked her to cast Wind Dance on his hands. It's a support magic that instantly enhances strength right if she can. She will be able to strengthen his handstand, then her power will be enough for him to hold this broadsword. Bari asked, he has 31 strength points and the requirement for broadsword is 35, isn't it? If he doesn't reach it by the end, he will get tired almost immediately. She remembered his gift and he said he would take the role in the tank, so she needed to stay behind him and attack as soon as she sees a good opportunity. He bet his life on her. He trusted her. She was impressed, agreed, and he read it, clarified, so let it be so. It works both ways, right? They have already been informed. She seemed to hear something, then cautiously asked, it takes a little time, right? This is the Minotaur. Ro looked at the beast and sharply asked, is it only me or did he really look angry? He gripped the sword even tighter in his hands. And the monster roared loudly. It lunged at them and swung the axe. Dealt an extraordinarily strong blow with its weapon. She was thrown backward by the force of strong gusts of wind. She sat down sharply and decided that it was only a shock front. She knew it could not be. Were they even capable of standing against such a monster? But as soon as the dust settled, she saw that he was holding. He held back the monster's attack with a sword. It surprised her and she asked, did he withstood against the Minotaur? Having colossal strength, he continued to hold back the monster, continuously blocking its attacks. Blocking the monster's attacks, he turned around and loudly shouted to Barry. He immediately regained consciousness. Jumped to the Minotaur and use gift of edge again. She stabbed the dagger into the Minotaur's hand and, with a tense look, she wondered if that was all the strength the strike had. How strong were his muscles? The protagonist called her and said she had managed well, and for her to attack in the same spot. She agreed and he continued to fend off all the Minotaur's attacks. He waited for the right moment and rushed forward to the monster and attacked again with the dagger. Relying on her gift, immediately after that she darted aside and thought, great, this time the cuts were deeper. She flinched. He jumped after them and their cooperation grew stronger with him. With every moment, the fight with the Minotaur turned into a war of attrition. The monster let out a very loud, furious roar. Bari said that it seemed to have gone crazy. Minotaur began to attack more actively with his. He struck with the axe, blocked him, and sharply pulled himself. Warned her about the danger. The strength was too great. Hard blows and the blade of his sword began to move. Everything started to crack. She got scared and ran to him. She turned to him and realized that he needed help, tried to assist. Tried to attack her in vain, but the monster is already here. The monster pushed her away with his muscles and further blocked the way, not letting pass all the Minotaur's attacks, and she, with surprise on her face, wondered how much the dance of the wind had strengthened him. Strength, how is he still standing? How did he manage to stay on his On his feet, she remembered his words and jumped. He moved towards the monster and thought that this guy believed in her and in her strength. Focused with a stone expression on her face, she struck. He plunged into the attack with her daggers and actually managed to inflict a deep wound. The monster felt terrible pain. With a sweep of his hand, he threw it away as if with one motion he waved it back at her. Removing his hand, he again attacked him with the weapon. It seemed to him that he was already somewhere on the edge. He barely managed to continue the attack with the axe, but because of the wounds he had already received, he stopped and fell to the ground. She was confused. He refused, and they asked him if the Minotaur had run out of strength. He had run out of strength. She sighed with relief when she realized what had happened and blossomed into a joyful smile. She said it worked. They won, survived the fight with the Minotaur, and he was also exhausted after that clash. He lowered his sword and blood dripped down his hands. She noticed this and with worry on her face loudly asked, "Is this the opposite effect? Now she will heal him." MC with a calm smile called her and asked if she was okay. Okay, she agreed, grabbed his backpack and said he just needed to sit down. Let him sit and I'll get you a potion, she said. He thanked her and lay down. He fell to the ground and said how glad he was that their plan still worked. He thought that such torments of fatigue had fallen on him as if he had never had the 4th level of endurance recovery. Ari returned, called him, and said she was bringing everything she could find. She gave him a healing potion and asked him to drink. He agreed and sincerely thanked her. She crept up from behind and whispered that now the wounds need to be smeared with healing ointment, so he should take off the cloak. Taking off the cloak, she began to unfasten it but could not. "I didn't expect it to be so heavy," he exclaimed loudly. "What kind of cape is this? Even armor would be lighter." "Is it made of iron?" He denied and explained. "The thing is made of heavy silver, the kind that falls from a rare monster." "Silver plate? Its silver resists all types of magical attacks but is many times heavier than any other metal and cannot be processed by any means. That's why it's called not a thing but a complete disappointment." She, with a confused face, opened a jar of ointment and asked, "Well, somehow he sewed this cloak, right?" Ro agreed and said that he melted it into plates, placed them on a wooden base, and hammered them out. "He simply transforms everything into the needed shape." She asked why he needed it if there are other types of armor. He smiled and replied that weight hardly bothers him. And he decided that it would be funnier that way. She froze in shock and he laughed. And said that the silver plates mostly lived on the 13th floor. It was designated for new travelers. She asked, "So that's why they started calling it the Floor Devourer?" He no longer remembered this and said that the fact that the Adventurers Guild gave him the task to exterminate the owlbear made him start descending to the 13th floor. He recalled the past and decided, the owlbear is a floor boss that roams the corridors of the dungeon. It took the lives of many adventurers who had just set out on their path, but as soon as it was killed, it would respawn in half a month. Being then an ordinary average guy, he hunted the owlbear again and again. 3 years passed, and finally he found the respawn point. Blocking one of the main arteries, he redirected the flow of magical elements and removed the monster forever. Thus, the 13th floor, feared as the floor of death, became accessible to novice adventurers. She was surprised when she remembered what had happened earlier and asked if he did not have a bad reputation in the bar. He gave a careless smile and said that while tracking an owlbear, he accidentally came across silver discs and decided to hunt for them too, so he could understand why they thought he had taken them. He stated that all the floors belong only to him. She, blinking confusedly, asked, "What about telling all the others, the small ones?" The Minotaur could not push him back with its attack all because he was pinned down and held by the weight of his own body. He took off his cloak and grabbed the sword. Moreover, one of his friends once even scolded him for such an idea. He finally found something to say. It was the first time such an opportunity had arisen. What she heard embarrassed her. Bird smiled and said that he was stranger than she had imagined. "Yuvamreni," the protagonist smiled and asked him. She asked if all travelers were like that. Didn't she think so? She laughed and said, "That's how it is." So, having overcome the Minotaur through joint efforts, they began to make peace with. Well, that conversation, which started by itself, did not last long. Bari caught the sound and immediately said that it was the bell of the time of fear and the fulfillment of wishes, time to pack up camp, the ring. The ringing came from the same place where the Minotaur had just appeared. She used auxiliary air magic, the one that allowed hearing sounds from a designated location. She noticed the monster flying overhead and loudly warned it, calling it a stone gargoyle. Consider, after all, their bodies are made of hard stone. Physical force strikes against them are almost powerless. He stuck his sword into the ground and loudly declared that he would take the monster's attack on his sword and She needed to lean on his back. They withstood this blow, and he decided that the two-handed sword had cracked, if that happened. If that blow had hit the body, there would be nothing to bury. The monster grabbed him by the back. She swung the dagger but stopped when she heard a ringing sound. She sharply turned around. She turned around and decided that they would barely cope with a single gargoyle. And if another appeared, she would no longer have time to cast a spell. She loudly called him and warned that he should be careful. Caution, the monster crashed into her at a crazy speed. At the same crazy speed, his blow threw her several meters to the side. The side, MC began to worry because about this, he shouted loudly to her. He sharply called out, jerked forward, and asked if she was okay. She did not answer. He tightly gripped the sword in his hand. With great difficulty and a jerk, he pulls her inside. Pull him out from under the ground and carry him through the gargoyle. Push him aside. He turned around. His face was tense as he thought about how to get Barry out of there as quickly as possible. Maybe the escaped gargoyle might return. She called him and said that the wishing Furan. It rang again. There were many of them, to the right and left. On both sides, he understood this and said that she must. She needs to hide in the cave. He stood in front of her. She stood near the cave entrance and said that they needed to summon wind dance on his hands. Otherwise, it was impossible. She would have to continue casting the spell so that it would not fade. He swallowed the tension through clenched teeth. How a true tragedy was unfolding right now. 2 days had already passed since the moment of the collapse. Yuika and the rest had been searching for their missing comrades all this time. They barely stood on their feet, and their anxiety only grew. The group was led by Nuku, the gift of recognition. Focused, with a tense face, he thought, recognition finds monsters by the magical flows coming from them. This gift was not suitable for finding lost friends. Behind him, he felt icy energy and a mocking aura. For 2 days, they had not managed to find a single clue. The Black Princess and the respected Mazakin were already beginning to lose patience. How could he tell them that his gift itself did not search for people at the crossroads? He suggested going to the right, thinking, if this continued, exhaustion and hunger would kill them and they would eventually become completely powerless. He sighed heavily and quietly said that they needed to find the luggage as soon as possible. Ivka heard this and asked if he himself, the poor fellow, was okay. There was nothing to worry about. If she really understood everything correctly, he denied everything and said that even if they found the luggage, they could not get to the surface without Sherpa himself, of course. He wanted him to be alive and well. Ozzy could laugh and, by the way, asked if they would push the girl into the same. Against the backdrop, Nuku tensed even more. Or because of this, he denied it and said. He stated that he and Bari had fought side by side for so many years. Of course, he wanted her to be okay too. They moved forward and he froze in place and thought that he shouldn't have said anything. He was pierced by fear as soon as Litz touched his shoulder. He turned around and a slightly embarrassed expression did not leave his face. He was still trying to understand what was wrong with this monster. Could it be that she really decided to cheer him up and called, asking why he was stuck there? They were supposed to show him the way. He agreed and replied that ahead were monsters, about 3. Cerberus appeared. He wanted to warn them about this, and Iveca called the King of the Dead in a serious tone and gave an order. He commanded them to attack and use Swamp of Duh to throw them into the attack. And he wove a spell of darkness and he apologized. He said that there is only one 3-headed Cerberus. He said that he usually does not make such a mistake. Let's. The smart ones patted him on the head and she said loudly in surprise that he had no right to attack at all. What was he counting on? Mazuakin said that the monster simply decided to empathize with their friend. She thought about it, apologized, and said that she had been too harsh with him. He said that he also admits his guilt. Nuku asked them not to worry. She shed a tear and decided that this monster understands all the subtleties of human relationships. She walked forward with a sad face and thought that they would still have to go through this feeling of hopelessness. They had passed through so many labyrinths that she could no longer count and had never in her life felt a search that radiated so much despair. She and Bari had been friends for so many years. She was always nearby like a younger sister who never leaves the older one's side. Of course, she wants everything to be fine with her. But like travelers, they had to be ready for the possibility of losing each other at any moment. They met Darling about 2 weeks ago and became lovers only 10 days ago. Such a short time is not enough to settle into irreversible love and truly weave a person into your life. She had not yet managed to become attached to him and had not given him her heart, so everything would have been fine with him, even if he were gone. Gone? Nuku called the Black Princess and said that there were plenty of monsters ahead. It already reminded her too much of a carnival. A barely noticeable surprise flashed in her voice. A carnival in this excerpt. She noticed it and was surprised, then, a little embarrassed, asked, Look, if they were really there. She and Mazukin rushed forward. Her heart was pounding, and it seemed to her she was afraid to find out the truth. Maybe all these monsters were drawn there by the smell of a person. Corpses they came across crowned lizard folk. With a wary look, she thought about the coming. The adventure in Sherpa, which was left without a group, had no chance of survival. He asked the princess, "Cover yourself and cast the Moonblade spell." She cried immediately as soon as it dawned on her. And in her thoughts she trembled. As soon as her beloved dies, she wouldn't endure this, no way. He warned the princess again that she should. She needs to go left and use the unstoppable soul killer spell. She dashed aside and grabbed. She drew the sword and thought that she had enough. Thinking about his death, she rolled back. As she moved forward, she thought that he was a true first-class Sherpa. So he definitely has to figure out how to do it, spoil it so it becomes stale. Alive, the horned monster with floppy ears blocked her way and immediately lunged with its tongue. Pausing for a moment, she used her skill to speed up, clenching her teeth from tension. She decided that this was exactly why the tears must stop. She wanted to believe that he was alive. She could attack the monster behind her with her magic. She kept running forward, using gift phantom needle on the bighorn monster. She just jumped to the ground and said his name was Nekusak, and that he had to fight the rest of the monsters. She kept running and thought that she really wanted to meet him again. She saw MC standing near the cage. Cave he dug in a terrible state, and then froze in fear before calling him. Yuka looked him over and wondered what was so special about that worthless sword. It didn't even look like a sword. The leather cloak was covered in soot and torn. It bore traces of fire, lightning, and ice. What kind of monsters had he faced? An empty, invisible gaze. His clothes were soaked with blood but had already darkened to a deep crimson color. He was barely conscious. But he still stood. She began to cry and thought that they had known each other for only a short time, so she would it be normal even if she never saw him again? Some nonsense. No matter how much time had passed since their meeting, even those 10 days they spent as lovers. Members met unimaginably much. She went to him, called darling, and thought that her heart already belonged to him. She hugged him, called him again, and said that it was her, the one he no longer had to fight. With incredible effort he pronounced her name and said that Bari was in this cave. She is has a fracture and exhausted magical powers. She needs urgent treatment. Mazukin entered the cave, called her, and said that there were no more monsters. They need to stop resorting to magic. She lay with her eyes closed and called him Dad. Nuku jumped out to them and said that they needed first aid. Eureka was confused, called Litz, and ordered them to guard the perimeter, and asked if there was anything that could stop the bleeding. Ro closed his eyes and thought that everyone survived. She pressed the cloth to his face with tears and asked, "Let them treat the wounds," and all returned to the surface together. Okay, 2 days after Twilight Sword returned to the surface. Hospital for Heroes, located near the entrance to the labyrinth. He was placed in a small ward for especially important patients on the very top floor. He sighed heavily, tensed his face, and thought, terribly grateful, but this luxury is already a nightmare in reality. There was a bathtub with undiluted magical elixirs, piles of hemostatic mixtures, and such elite healing magic as if they were going to raise the dead. Earlier he came to the doctor and said that he was already completely healthy, so he wanted to be discharged. He adjusted his glasses, refused an additional examination, and then declared, Twilight Sword ordered him to heal, so that not even a scratch remained. He thought, if Yueka comes tomorrow, he will ask her to help. To help with the dispatch. He heard a knock on the door and decided that it was the doctor. He was the one who allowed her to enter. She opened the door. He approached Darling and said that she came to visit him. Can she come in? He called her and replied that there was no need to ask about it. He was surprised that she wore a snow-colored dress, and he said she admitted that she usually does not wear such things. Bari chose this for dinner parties, but such places are not for her. Today she wore it for the first time. For the first time. How does he like it? He smiled and said she was irresistibly attractive. She was delighted to hear this. She sat next to him, and the protagonist confessed, during the last descent she hardly rested. Did she at least get some sleep when they returned? She smiled and replied that she just lay down for a minute and woke up only after a day and a half. During lunch she went to check on Bari. He, a bit worried, said that she seemed to have been sent to a hospital that deals with fractures. How is she? Is she okay? Smiling, she assured that she was not worried at all, but Mazukin was too tense. She told her how he did not lose his composure and ordered to hide in that cave. She was very grateful to him for saving her life. As she understood, she wanted to apologize for her behavior. Would he accept the apology? He agreed, and she was even pleased by that, but her thoughts returned again to something else. She turned away and whispered something barely audibly. He noticed it and called her by name. She turned to him and he asked what was wrong with her. He was so worried that she still asked if she could climb there, and he never fully understood why, but agreed to it after that. She lay down next to him on the bed and covered herself with a blanket. He looked at her and thought that if it had been an expensive dress, it would definitely have been wrinkled. Eureka asked shyly, "By the way, how did he feel?" He felt that she smelled of flowers. He also began to get nervous and said that he felt great and was ready to defeat even the Minotaur with his bare hands. So he wants to be discharged already tomorrow, and he noticed how she lowered her head and called him by name. She said that she had just become an adventurer and for the first time felt fear on her own skin. After the collapse that separated them and until the very moment when they met again, her heart was squeezed for a second by paralyzing horror. Her head was filled with excuses for leaving them one after another. It hurt so much that she wanted to tear out her own heart just to finally feel the emptiness. But as soon as she saw that the passage was teeming with monsters, she immediately thought exactly how she would find their bodies. Her beloved believed in her and never doubted for a second, but even she thought about what she would do if not a single one remained alive, and she was the one who was supposed to believe in him more than anyone. She apologized, and he decided that she was one of those who stick to their own principles and the law. Alas, that is why she has such strong spirit, pure as the night sky. He hugged her and said he does not recognize love that believes blindly. Her ability to act even when her mind is in complete chaos, and thus turn any situation to her advantage, is one of her wonderful traits. Logical conclusions are one thing, but the desires of the heart are quite another. He believed in her and knows she believed in him too. So she is still very good, and he loves her just like that. To touch her, she leaned forward. He approached him, whispered "darling," and kissed him. They continued kissing for a little while longer, and he was trembling a little inside. He thought everything was already hopelessly ruined. He didn't understand at all how to relieve that tension, and he saw nothing. Any buttons or knots, maybe they were just hidden under the ruffles. Yuika touched his lips and whispered what he said. He said that in such moments, it's normal to have to pretend to be like a mischievous kitten. She began rubbing her head against his face, and he thought that she really was like a kitten. Face blushes deeply from shame. She addressed him as darling and said that this was exactly why she asked him to be gentle with her. She frowned and began to imitate the behavior of a cat, running through her mind. What if? I thought that maybe she should ask T about it. Once, or rather, the next morning they woke up in bed. An MC greeted her with good morning, smiling. It embarrassed her so much that she responded the same way in tone and with the same expression. Then they walked down the street and she, blushing, asked if it wasn't perhaps just pretending to be a kitten. And indeed, there was no need. Why didn't he tell her about it yesterday? He got a little embarrassed, apologized, and said that she tried so hard. And it was very sweet. He didn't finish speaking. She firmly squeezed his hand and looked displeased. He loudly declared that everything was not like that at all. He said he couldn't take off her dress, so they were even. She was on the verge of tears from embarrassment, and also loudly said that his embarrassment was nowhere near hers. He felt a threat in her gaze and, mumbling embarrassedly, said that no one would feel worse from this because when two share something shameful with each other, their relationship only becomes stronger. She calmed down a bit and said that then now it was his turn to tell her something equally embarrassing about himself. Yvko was convinced her behavior yesterday could have no other explanation: the dress she usually didn't wear, the perfume, and the fact that they slept together in one bed. He miraculously survived the first and second descents, however. There was no guarantee that their next third descent would go smoothly. She didn't want her feelings for her beloved person to be reduced to mere pity. Regrets when they were finally found, she sighed with relief, but then she saw it was such an unbreakable adventure. The spirit of the traveler he hid within himself and fell in love again, as if for the first time. Darling has a family for whom he is ready to do anything, and she carries the duty to destroy dungeons. They cannot sacrifice what is most precious for love, but she has not yet let go of that hand. Rose said, "Around the corner, the home of relatives who take care of Marie." Ivica was already about to say something, but she saw her crying, ran up to her and called out loudly. She called her sister and asked, "Is this the picture book you gave her? What happened?" He to him, with a tearful expression on her face, she exclaimed and began to beg for forgiveness. She hugged her and whispered that it was not necessary. She does not need to apologize. It is not her fault. Itchin Cullen left the house and began to mock. They pounced on her, but as soon as they saw him, they immediately retreated and ran back. He looked at them, and the expression on her face was too displeased. He asked, "Are these the two who did that?" Mari continued, "Crow. So you decided to return?" he asked. She asked, She stretched out her hand and said that she no longer had any idea why all this commotion. It's foolish to take children at their word. Who knows what really happened there? Maybe he just wanted to quarrel with her. He pulled coins from the bag, denied everything, and stated that everyone saw how her children teased his crying sister. He handed over the money and asked her to ask them not to do this again. He only snorted and slammed the door right in his face. She was dissatisfied and was about to ask something, but he immediately cut her off. They would talk about it as soon as they returned. He greeted Mari and, barely smiling, said that it was time for them to go home. When they returned home, Yuka loudly called Darling and said that it was not worth giving up so quickly. Why did he just let them go? He should have demanded compensation. Sensation, he asked her to calm down and said that the pages were dirty, so for now. He carefully wiped the cover, after which he took it to a specialist, let him glue it. She was happy and, wiping tears from her eyes, asked, "Will this really help?" Help, the protagonist agreed and said they would come for it tomorrow. She asked if he always asked those people to take care of her. He agreed and explained, "Murao is my only relative." She asked if the money he paid would be enough for kindergarten, which would definitely be better for her, right? Right, he said that unfortunately there was nothing like that in their city. He hugged his sister and said that children without families either starve or end up on the black market. He agreed, they did not. They did not have the warmest relationship, but if something did happen, at least she would be safe. Life, she agreed with a worried face and wanted to object, but she was struck with horror. The deeper the group descended, the deeper she descended. The more danger awaited Sherpa, the greater the risk his exposure faced. But the lives of Darling and Marie were in danger, and not from someone else, but from her. MC called her with a small smile and said she didn't need to worry about it. He had already made his choice. Decision after careful risk assessment, and they pay him so much that probably nothing can go wrong. She said they are really close, not just as a traveler and a Sherpa. He did not manage to finish because he refused and stated that this was a matter only for his family. She was impressed by the fact that she thought that she was pushed away, or rather made to understand her place so that she would not take responsibility. He smiled and said that, to be honest, he plans to move to a big city so that Mari could go to school. So he will gradually save money, and if he adds to this, then the reward they give him for the next descent. His disagreement, and he will get exactly as much as needed, and then she will finally be able to live without worries. Yuka said, looking determined, that if money is the reason. Now she immediately noticed the expression on his face. Aggression and the thought that they definitely meet. Dating does not yet mean that you can transfer everything onto the other person. He does not need charity, and he will not accept. Ithai's quiet smile told her this without any words. He decides for himself what to do. It seems he even carries this principle as a motto. He takes responsibility for his sister, and after that they will start a new life. But in this future which Darling so desires, she is not there. Last night they were burned by burning feelings. They clearly love each other, but it still remains a matter of his family, so he does not consider her close, someone to trust with family problems. She loves him so much, but for him she still remains a stranger. She stubbornly looks at him and thinks he will not live to see this. She began to take off her gloves and said that she believes he is guided by the best intentions, but his words struck her to the core. Ro was confused and called her name. She threw the gloves on the table and with great embarrassment loudly declared that we must take her as his wife. He became even more confused by this, and she, with a determined expression on her face, she thought that this way the problems of her favorites would finally disappear. The next morning he was already tied up in the Sherpa Guild and did not understand what was going on there. The department employees tensed their muscles in front of him and declared that the report on the underground descent into the dungeon was delayed. He would not go until he wrote it. He took it upon himself and wrote. Meanwhile, they started dancing, and he apologized and promised that everything would be done by morning. Their sudden appearance was so unexpected. He was pulled out of the house, so he didn't even have time to prepare breakfast for Mari. Gunji also tensed his muscles and loudly said that there was nothing to worry about here and showed with his hand. He pointed aside and ordered him to look here, Sherpas. He brought her a bunch of different dishes and invited her to eat. One of them said joyfully, "Here are candies and juice, take as much as you want. There is plenty here." He had already taken his sister with him. Though she had been to the Sherpa Guild more than once, and she knew these big men were actually kind. The guild leader also approached and said that they needed to stop. He also wanted to take care of her. Gima, with a look of dissatisfaction, replied they should calm down, otherwise they would actually lose control. Biting, she asked the employee to close the door, called him, and said that these guides contain all the information about the labyrinths of the Tyro's dungeon. According to him, they would fill in the gaps on the maps. He agreed to tell her everything that happened in the dungeon right closer to noon, right in the very center of the city, in the temple of the goddess Galatica. Bari, with a joyful expression on her face, left the building and thought that she had finally managed to level up and even get a new ability, probably worth checking the report with the princess. She froze as soon as she noticed the protagonist walking down the road. The road instinctively hid behind a flower bed. She looked back and decided, the man walking ahead is the head of the Advent Travelers Guild. She was sure his name was Joe, but who is this woman? Why are they walking with her? Her heart clenched with a bad feeling, so she decided to follow them. She set off after them and reached the building they entered. She used the gift Fear Unconsciousness and decided that it was here she received the invitation from the Tyro City Hall. For dinner at a first-class restaurant, she attached a magical mark to his back. Note, this gift allows hearing sounds within the radius of the same mark to which the gift's device is attached. She heard a restaurant worker say that they needed to go to the private room on the second floor. Their partner will be here soon. After that, she heard a knock on the door and someone was apologizing to Baramun for being late. She caught Jim saying updating the map takes time. Bari decided she was from Sherpa Guild. It was the voice of a woman who had just passed by. Mer said that it turned out they broke the diving record again. She closed her eyes and thought she needed to gather herself and listen to the conversation. Mer added that they could sit down. There was enough food for everyone, so no one needed to be embarrassed. He already knows about Twilight's sword down to the details, right? Then he will be able to answer his question. She looked with a serious expression. Why such an important man could secretly find out information about their team. A bad feeling did not leave her. He said he was interested in learning about the gift of the Phantom Needle. How many creatures can this technique subdue? MC said he did not know the exact number, about 10, but he could be wrong. She smiled because she heard this and thought he just lied, although in reality there were many more.